Chapter 61. Fazan, who was standing in front, murmured a Buddha's name. After a moment, an orb shining with solemn golden light appeared in his hand. At first, the light seemed to be attached to Fazan, but as Fazan activated his power, the golden light brightened. With the orb as the center, the golden light spread to all directions like tide. Shah Danan stood where he was. He felt a whistling sound next to his ear. The golden light had already passed by him. Everyone's face was reflected with light gold. At the same time, they felt comfortable. Even if they were a bit nervous, they were instantly calmed down. In the blink of an eye, the huge space became as bright as day. If it weren't for the strange rocks and the wriggling bats, one would have thought that it was a Buddhist paradise. Li Su, who always had his eyes on top of his head, was surprised, said, "Orb of reincarnation." Fazan looked at him, said, "Li Shi Xiang, good eyesight." Li Su's tone seemed to be more polite to Fazan, said, "Not at all. Fazan Shi Xiang, you are the one with profound cultivation." With the light of Orb of Reincarnation, Shah Danan could see clearly that he had stepped on a clean, hard ground. He lifted his head and saw the black bats had disappeared, but the rustling sound was still beside his ears. He looked carefully again. Only then did he discover that at the top of the cave behind him, countless black bats were still gathered at the top of the cave, but just above the hard ground they were standing on the rocks at the top of the cave, there was a thin red line streaking across the top of the cave, looking like a vein in the rock. With this thin red line as the boundary, countless bats gathered outside. Not a single one of them crossed the red line, and there was no stinking bat droppings outside, just a few feet away from their feet. Fazan looked around, said in a deep voice, "There are a lot of strange things here. Everyone be careful." How could they not know? But when they finally stepped on a clean ground, after checking there was nothing strange, the first thing they did was to tidy up their clothes. Issa, who was standing next to Shah Danan, took off his shoes, poured out the disgusting things inside, whispered to Shah Danan, "For the first time in my life, I know walking on a clean road is such a comfortable thing." Shah Danan smiled and quickly cleaned himself up. He felt more comfortable. After a while, Kevin saw that everyone was almost ready and said, "Let's go." Then he walked into the depths of the cave. Everyone followed him. Soon, as they moved forward, they were plunged into endless darkness behind them. And in front of them, it was as if the darkness was like a demonic beast. It opened its arms and revealed a sinister smile, welcoming their arrival. The speck of light in the darkness moved forward slowly. Just like that, they walked for an unknown amount of distance. This ancient and deep cave seemed to have no end. Although it was still very spacious, it was full of twists and turns. Apart from a general inclination towards the ground, it was almost impossible to tell the direction. They could no longer hear the rustling of the bats at the cave entrance. In the darkness, there was no other sound except their footsteps. Shah Danan felt the humidity around him was getting heavier. He did not know how deep they were underground. The pearl of reincarnation that was summoned by Fazan was still glowing with golden Buddha light, shining on everyone. Kevin, who was at the front, also summoned the union mirror just in case. The two treasures shined on each other. After a while, Kevin suddenly stopped. He held out his hand and said to the people behind him, "Wait." Everyone immediately stopped. The surroundings were quiet. Not a single sound could be heard. The light of the Samsara pearl and the Six Harmonies mirror gradually brightened. In front of everyone's eyes, two forks suddenly appeared in the cave ahead. They were deep and dark, and no one knew where they led to. It was as if a demon had opened its mouth. In the middle of the path, also the center of the two paths, there was a large stone tablet as tall as 6 people. On it, there were 4 blood-red words. "The way of heaven is in me." Incense Li Su snorted, said angrily, "Falcon heretic, you dare to call yourself the heavenly Tao." Fa Xiang instead frowned, took a few more glances at the stone tablet, said, "When I came, I heard my teacher, Puhong Master, said, 800 years ago the evil sect indeed had such a stone tablet in this cave, but at that time it had already been slashed by our good faction celestials with great magical power. Seeing it today, why is it still intact?" At this moment, Incense Yanin, who had been silent all this time, suddenly said, "Look at the bottom of the stone tablet. Is there a crack?" Her voice was soft, made people's heart flutter. Plus, it was the first time for the Jadian people to hear Yanin speak. They were a little surprised. Everyone walked up and took a closer look. Sure enough, there was a fine crack there. It slanted upwards and divided the entire stone tablet into two halves. The stone vein on the crack was dark red, but if one didn't look closely, they wouldn't be able to see it. Kever nodded, said to Yanin, "Yen Shimi is very careful." Yanin smiled, lowered her head again, and did not speak. Keverin looked at the stone tablet again, turned to the crowd, and said, "Since this stone tablet has been repaired, it can be seen that the Falcon heretics are most likely here, doing some shady business. This time we came to the right place." Fazan continued, "Qi Shi Xiang is right. Danger lurks everywhere in this cave. There's a problem in front of us. These two paths, which one should we take?" Keverin pondered for a moment, said, "Fazan Shi Xiang, you said your master Puhong, holy monk, had mentioned to you about this place. Did he mention about this path?" Fa Xiang nodded his head and said, "Teacher indeed mentioned it before, but he only found out from the previous generation founder. It was said that during the good and evil war behind these two forked roads, there were evil sect, evil people's lairs. As for the current situation, he was not very clear." Everyone was silent. After a while, Keverin looked at the other three people, said to Fazan and others, "If that is so, I think we should split into two. 4 of us from Jadian will go to the left path. Fazan, Fashion Shi Xiang, and the 2 from Incense will go to the right path. If we encounter Falcon heretics, we will warn them with a whistle. What do you think?" Fazan was silent. Although he knew it was not a good thing to split like this, the cave was deep, and they did not know how far the 2 paths were. If they went the wrong way and then turned back, it would be too late. The people here were all elites of each faction. They may be able to protect themselves. He turned to Li Su and Yanin. Seeing they did not have any objection, he said, "Then we will do as Qi Shi Xiang said. Everyone be careful." Then he glanced at Sha Danan again. Sha Danan's heart was moved. He felt this Fazan Shi Xiang really looked at him differently, but his face still smiled. Kever nodded, saluted Fazan and others, then led Sha Danan and others into the left path. After a few steps, the light behind them turned and disappeared. It seemed Fazan and others also entered the right path. Kevern walked to the front. He raised the union mirror above his head and activated his spiritual power. The yellow light of the union mirror shined down and covered the 4 of them. This path was much narrower than the cave they came from. At the same time, the rocks on both sides were sharp. Sha Danan almost got hurt. The only similarity was the eternal darkness. In this place, there was no light at all. The 4 Jadians were not in the mood to talk, especially Kevern, who walked at the front. He was fully focused, guarding against the unknown danger ahead. They walked for a long time. Sha Danan could not help but wonder if Fezin Shi Xiang could hear him even if he encountered Falcon heretics, and let out a long howl. At this moment, a strange thing happened. In the path they were walking on, in the eternal darkness, suddenly there was a loud woo-woo ghost cry. It was deafening and frightening. The 4 were shocked. Just as Kevern was about to warn them, his body trembled. From an endless darkness around them, all kinds of strange lights appeared and rushed towards the 4 of them at the same time, hitting the union mirror's halo. The power was so strong that even the union mirror shook. Kevern's body shook violently. He could not speak anymore. He quickly calmed his mind and increased his power to protect the mirror. The ghost cry was getting louder and louder, making people dizzy. Issa, Anan, and Sha Danan protected Kevern in the center. Countless beams of light were pushed back by the union mirror, turned around in the air, then fiercely turned back and charged again. In the darkness, there were countless of enemies, and in the air, there were countless espers. Chapter 62. Kevern's face was pale. Both of his hands held the incantation. Even under the attack of the esper, the union mirror still stabilized. The circle of light brightened. Just when the Jadian were about to feel relieved, Sha Danan suddenly felt the hard ground under his feet moved. His mind moved, but before he could react, he heard Zheng Shushu shout, "Be careful, Before he could finish, a loud sound was heard, overpowering the roars in the sky. In that instant, everyone felt the earth shaking. A strong force gushed out from under their feet, shattering the ground into pieces. The 4 Jadian disciples were sent flying. The 6 Union mirror could protect the surroundings, but it could not protect under their feet. This sudden attack from the inside. Immediately the light scattered and fell back on a Kevern's flying figure. Countless of light whizzed past in the darkness. It was like they were laughing proudly and charged at the 4 people. Shah Danan was standing at the front. He was pushed by the strong force and flew forward. But he had cultivated in Jadian for many years. He did not panic. He put the fire stick in his hand on his chest. The familiar cold feeling spread through his body. Fire stick glowed with faint green light in midair. It was facing the light that was chasing after him. After a moment, one of the dark red light was in front of him. Shah Danan smelled blood. He wanted to vomit. He quickly held his breath and controlled the fire stick. The green light rose and blocked the dark red light. Under the light of the fire stick, the dark red light dimmed a lot. A low and bewildered voice suddenly came from an unknown place in the darkness. At that moment, the other 2 light, one yellow and one gray, also came and hit the fire stick. Shah Danan could see with the light that the dark red light was a dark red trident with thick blood stain on it. The yellow light was a 3 feet long sword. The gray light was strange. It was the fang of an unknown beast. Shah Danan's body was still in midair. He had already stabilized himself. But unexpectedly, he was hit by the 3 espers. Although he had fire stick to stop it, the huge force pushed him back. He could not control himself anymore and hit the stone wall heavily. Half of his body was sunk into the wall. Stone chips flew everywhere. Shah Danan was seeing stars. The pain on his back was deep into his heart, but he knew it was a matter of life and death. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain. He landed on the ground. The 3 death objects turned in midair and came down fiercely. In the darkness, where were the people controlling the esper? Shah Danan was in a difficult position. He held his incantation and roared. The fire stick flew into the air and collided with the yellow sword and beast fang. After a loud bang, both of them were pushed away. He quickly jumped forward. The other dark red trident could not stop in time and hit the stone wall behind him. The stone pieces flew everywhere and made a big hole in the stone wall. At this moment, the gray fang came back and smashed down on his head. The shining cold fang was especially eye-catching in the darkness. Looking at its momentum, Shah Danan did not even need to think to know the result of this strange esper hitting him. Shah Danan gritted his teeth. Both of his hands drew in the air. The fire stick moved at will. Green light flashed. It appeared above his head and hit the fang. In midair, a low muffled sound was heard. A crack appeared on the fang. A scream came from afar. It was filled with pain and surprise. But Shah Danan did not have the time to savor the little bit of happiness. The yellow sword was already in front of him. Shah Danan did not have time to react. His forehead was sweating. He shouted in danger. Both of his hands shook. His body floated up and merged into the green light of the fire stick. The yellow sword did not leave any leeway. It made a turn in midair and charged up again from the bottom of his feet. There was a fang above and a flying sword below. Shah Danan's body trembled. He did not have time to think. He shrank his body and chanted. The green light of the fire stick brightened and wrapped around him. Boom! 2 loud bangs sounded at the same time above Shah Danan's head and under his feet. The 2 esper of the enemy flew back. The fire stick trembled in the air. Shah Danan gasped for breath. His heart almost stopped beating at that moment. In that moment of illusion, he almost thought he saw the fire stick was broken into pieces. But fortunately, although the unknown material of the fire stick was ugly, it was extremely tough and undamaged. But the flying sword fang was dimmed, most likely damaged. But even so, the green light protecting Shah Danan also faded away after the fire stick was hit. Shah Danan was overjoyed. When he was about to recall the fire stick, a sharp pain came from his shoulder. Half of his body was powerless, his mind was blank. When he lowered his head, he saw that a small dark red fork had actually pierced through his chest and shoulder, causing dark red blood to gush out incessantly. It was the dark red fork. While Shah Danon was distracted, it ambushed and heavily injured him. Shah Danon saw the dark red color on the fork was brightened. It was like it was awakened by the smell of blood. He groaned. He was about to pull the fork away. Suddenly, as the blood mark on the fork deepened, a shadow rose from the fork and tightly attached to Shah Danon's back. The owner of the dark red fork seemed to be a parasite on the magic treasure. Shah Danon felt dizzy. He had no strength to shake off the heretic. Besides the pain, there was also a numbing itch. Most likely there was poison on it. He looked from the corner of his eyes, but he could not see the face of the heretic. He could only see the hand that was tightly holding on his shoulder. It was dry and dirty, stinky. From afar, there was a burst of wild laughter. Behind him, there was a dark voice. "Jade brats, you are looking for death. Obediently give me the blood." Before Shah Danon could understand the meaning of the words, he understood from his action. The heretic in the shadow opened his mouth and bit on Shah Danon's left neck, sucking the blood. At the same time, the dark red fork became brighter, like it was also drinking the blood. Shah Danon was extremely terrified. All the blood in his body went to his throat. His body felt light. All the strength in his body slowly disappeared. Even the fire stick in midair fell to the ground. This scene, in a trance, he suddenly returned to the past, the deep valley. That was a nightmare. The fire stick fell from his head. When it landed in front of him, it glowed with faint green light, like it was summoning something. Shah Danon caught it. The cold feeling on the fire stick was surging like it was raging. The blood in his body kept flowing out, being sucked by the heretic. Shah Danon could not hear any sound from the outside. He used the last bit of strength in his body. Like a trapped beast, he thrust the glowing green fire stick into the heretic behind him. The fire stick was blunt, but at this moment it was like the body was tofu and thrust into it. The heretic's body shook, stopped sucking blood. He could not believe it. He turned his head and looked at Shah Danon. Shah Danon also saw him at the same time. In the darkness, it was like the cold sneer of the nether devil, also like someone's heartbeat in the darkness. Shah Danon's hand that was holding the fire stick could feel the heartbeat. It was like the flow of blood, also like the devil's cheer. The light on the dark red fork quickly dimmed. Behind him, endless darkness rushed toward him. At the moment when the darkness swallowed Shah Danon and the heretic, Shah Danon saw a scene that he could never forget in his life while he was half-conscious. The heretic's wrinkled, but still full face shriveled. His flesh turned into dry skin and attached to his bones. The next moment, the darkness surrounded him. He regained what he lost. The endless power came from the fire stick and melted into his body. Shah Danon woke up, but he was startled. The wound on his shoulder was still painful, but the blood had stopped under the effect of the unknown power. But for this young man, he did not notice that. In his mind, there was only one thought. What did I do? What did I do? Chapter 63. Far behind him, the sound of battle was lingering. The three Jadian disciples were fighting fiercely with other heretics in the darkness. But at Shah Danon's side, it suddenly fell into a strange silence. Shah Danon was lost in thought, but the owner of the yellow flying sword and gray fong had witnessed the strange scene. He was too surprised and did not know what to do. Cynical. Am I seeing it right? Jiang Lao sand-sucked human's blood. How come he was sucked dry instead? Another person in the darkness said gruffly, "Damn, there is someone in Jadian who can cultivate this art of vampire. Is this guy a disciple of our faction?" The person who spoke first spat, but could not say anything after a moment. He said angrily, "No, this guy's origin is strange. We must ask him." Two balls of light brightened in front of Shah Danon. Two figures appeared. Shah Danon regained his consciousness and was surprised. He quickly threw away the distracting thoughts and focused on the enemy. In the light, the yellow flying sword and the gray fong returned to their hands. The person on the left caught the flying sword. It was a tall and thin man. His face was thin, hooked nose and small eyes. The person next to him was even weirder. Shah Danon was surprised. He was also tall, but his appearance was very weird. His eyelids drooped, nose protruded, ears pointed upward, lips red, a long tongue stuck out from time to time. He looked like a dog. The gray fong flew back to his hand. Shah Danon immediately thought, could it be the fong of a big dog? The man called Cynical saw Shah Danon couldn't move his eyes away from him. His eyes were filled with surprise. He was angry, shouted, "Hey, you little devil, why are you staring at Cynical Dialectian?" Cynical Dialectian? Shah Danon frowned. He found the person who looked like Cynical was wearing a black Taoist robe. It seemed like he was from the same faith faction as Jadian, but he did not know if there was any relation if he traced back 3,000 years. The person who called himself Cynical Dialectian saw Shah Danon was looking down on him. He was even angrier, said, "Little devil, I am asking you, how did you kill the vampire?" Shah Danon, startled, said, "What vampire?" The tall man beside him said angrily, "Isn't that the one on your back?" Shah Danon remembered he was still carrying the body on his back. He felt a chill on his neck. He jumped away and threw the body down. Bang! The body fell on the ground. Shah Danon felt disgusted and turned his head away. Wild Dog Taoist and the tall man glanced at that skeleton and then looked at each other. Both saw bewilderment in each other's eyes. The art of sucking blood was cruel and strange. Although it was powerful, it also caused great harm to the body. After practicing it, one would not look like a human, not like a ghost. Although they were from the evil faction and had always kept a respectful distance, but they still knew a thing or two about this mysterious skill. The person lying on the ground in front of them, the vampire who was known as the only inheritor of the great art of vampiric sucking, had all his blood essence sucked dry in the blink of an eye. As far as the two of them knew, needless to say, this cultivation far surpassed the dead vampire, Jiang Lao San. Even a legendary vampire demon might not have such cultivation. But looking at this Jadian kid, he did not have the strange aura of vampire devil. Cynical Dialectian looked at Shah Danon, said, "You are vampire old senior's disciple?" Shah Danon, startled, said, "What vampire old senior?" Cynical Dialectian opened his mouth, his long tongue flickered. Shah Danon could not help but think of the big dog Big Yellow from Bamboo Peak on Mount Jadian. But just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard a scream from the back of the cave. Flying sword flashed. A man in black fell out from the darkness. His face was covered with blood. He struggled on the ground for a few times, looked like he could not survive. Shah Danon suddenly realized his companions were fighting with their lives, but he was talking to the Falcon heretics here. He was really confused. He immediately rose up and was going to help. Cynical Dialectian and the tall man saw Shah Danon suddenly moved. They were surprised. They thought he was going to attack them. They quickly put up their guard. But when Shah Danon moved, he suddenly fell down with his teeth bared. He half kneeled on the ground, took a cold breath. Cold sweat came out from his forehead. Shah Danon was in a hurry. He forgot the dark red trident was still stuck in his shoulder. When he moved, the pain immediately pierced into his heart and spleen. He fell down again. The temporarily stopped bleeding was now flowing out from the wound again. Seeing such a good opportunity, how could Cynical Dialectian and the tall man let it go? They would rather kill the wrong person than let it go. Their eyes glowed fiercely, the fangs in their hands brightened again. But at this moment, a clear whistling sound suddenly came from behind. In the darkness, a dazzling blue light suddenly lit up. It was so dazzling that it immediately suppressed all the other lights. In the blue light, Aeolian Firmus was proudly unsheathed. Behind it, Anan stood in the air, her clothes fluttering in the wind. Under Wild Dog Taoist and that tall man's stunned stare, Tianya Celestial Sword's blue light exploded, transforming into an enormous blue light sword, slashing down towards the darkness. Immediately, many mixed lights flew up to resist, but once it came into contact with the enormous and pure blue light, it dispersed into ashes. A series of strange cries could be heard as 5 or 6 human figures jumped out from the shadows. With a rumbling sound, the blue light sword struck the stone wall, causing crushed stones to fly in all directions. Its power was astonishing. The people who jumped out were all wounded. At the same time, the white light of Kevern's frozen sword also brightened. It suddenly charged out from the side. The sword energy passed by. Several Falcon followers turned into ice sticks. Zhang Shu Shu, who was flying on his sword, smashed them one by one. The tall man in front of Sha Danan and cynical Dialectian looked at each other, then left Sha Danan and rushed forward. Yellow Flying Sword and Grey Fong were released at the same time, blocked Kevern and Issa's attack. Their cultivation seemed to be a level higher than the Falcon people. They immediately blocked the attack of Kevern and the others, but in their hearts, they were complaining bitterly. Originally, they had spied on the scene of Kaheo and the rest being attacked by the bats last night, so they set up an ambush in the depths of the ancient cave, suddenly attacked, and broke the seemingly indestructible Union Mirror, Halo Barrier, then defeated the 4 Jadian disciples one by one. The plan was completed on time, but the Jadian disciples' cultivation was unexpectedly high, difficult to deal with. In this ambush, the Falcon were led by cynical Dialectian, the tall man, and vampire Jiang Lao San. They could see Sha Danan was the weakest among the 4, so they arranged 3 of them to attack together. They intended to quickly finish off Sha Danan, then separately deal with the other 3. But things were strange. Although Sha Danan was injured, vampire Jiang Lao San was strangely sucked dry of his blood and died. At this moment, even though they were temporarily blocking Kevern and Issa, there was still a beautiful girl riding on a blue sword. Even though the brat behind them was injured, he was very strange. If the 2 of them attacked together, the situation would be very bad. After another 2 rounds, Anan injured a few evil faction disciples and was about to turn around. Wild Dog Taoist shouted, "Run!" The tall man next to him had the same thought as him. They both withdrew their espers at the same time, and with 2 swoosh, they turned into 2 beams of light and escaped deep into the cave. When the rest of the evil faction disciples saw this, they cried out in fear and scattered in all directions. Kevern made a prompt decision and shouted, "Chase those 2." Then he rode his sword and chased after them. Issa followed closely. Anan's blue Aeolian Firmus turned and was about to chase after them, but then she remembered something. When she turned back, she saw Sha Danan rose into the air with his glowing green fire stick. His shoulder was bleeding, but the dark red trident was pulled out from his shoulder. Sha Danan flew forward. Anan looked at his figure, startled for a moment, then followed. This chase in the depths of the cave was somewhat similar to the scene of Sha Danan and Hidi chasing the monkey Xiao Hui at the back of Bamboo Peak. It was full of twists and turns, sometimes to the left, sometimes to the right, sometimes to the sky, sometimes to the ground, and then to a fork in the road. But the 4 Jadian people did not care so much, only looking at the 2 rays of light, one yellow and one gray, chasing closely. Chapter 64. The cave was filled with strange rocks, strange peaks. Sha Danan followed closely behind his companions, focused on controlling the fire stick. At the end, some places were so narrow that only allowed 1 person to pass through. Sha Danan did not have time to think. He whistled and passed through. The chase turned into 6 beams of light in the darkness of the cave. Sha Danan could only feel the wind and darkness were entangled together, endlessly coming at him. The chase lasted for almost an hour. Cynical Dialectian and the tall man used their familiarity with the terrain past left and right. Although they did not get rid of the 4 people behind them, they did not close the distance. Suddenly, there was a beam of light in front of them. Cynical Dialectian and the tall man immediately flew toward that direction. Kevern and others followed closely. Sha Danan followed behind them. The pain in his shoulder gradually faded. Just now, he had forcefully endured the sharp pain to pull out the small fork and actually followed them. Even he himself was rather surprised. Although his shoulder was in pain, but the blood and meridians in his body were active, as if he had an inexhaustible strength. But once he thought of the scene just now, once he thought of what Wild Dog Taoist said, the 2 words blood-sucking, his heart turned cold, the chill seeped into his bones. The light in front of them was getting closer, getting brighter and brighter. The 6 of them were like arrows leaving the bow, rushed toward the light. The light, like a strange flower that bloomed in the darkness, brightened their eyes. Sha Danan followed them into the light. His eyes brightened. He was surprised by the scene in front of him. It turned out that the last place they had chased after was a wide and straight passageway. Outside of this passageway was an unbelievably large space. The ceiling of the cave was 100 feet above their heads, and the ground was 10 feet below their feet. Not far ahead of them, there was a huge stone that emitted a strong light, illuminating the entire space. But the most surprising thing was not this huge rock, but behind this huge rock, in the depths of the light, there was a huge abyss. The light emitted by this huge rock lit up the ceiling of the cave, but it seemed to be unable to penetrate into the abyss behind it. Looking from the sky, it was pitch black, and even the other end of the abyss could not be seen. There was only a deathly, eerie darkness. There were 3 people standing in front of the boulder. One was a bearded man, one was a beautiful young woman, and the last one was a pale-faced young man dressed in white. He had an evil look on his face. Cynical Dialectian and the tall man landed in front of the giant stone. Kevin saw all of them had strange appearance. He did not dare to be careless. He called his faction members and landed 5 feet away from the giant stone. Shah Danon stood still and looked at the strange glowing boulder. There were 3 large characters carved on it with ancient seal script. Forsaken Abyss. Looking at the 4 Qing Yun sect members descending, the few people standing under the huge rock did not make any movements. Only a bearded, burly man frowned and said, "Wild dog, Lu Gao, both of you are too weak, encountering a few Qing Yun juniors and actually ended up in such a sorry state, and even led them to this forsaken abyss." Cynical Dialectian blushed. When he was about to argue, a middle-aged woman behind the man looked at them, suddenly screamed, "Where is Jiang Lao-san?" Cynical Dialectian looked at the Jade and said, "Died by their hands." What? These people, who were originally as steady as Mount Tai, were all moved, but it seemed not because the Jadian people were skilled enough to kill Jiang Lao-san. The young lady was startled, shook her head and said, "This time if vampire demon investigates, it will be hard for us to explain." The bearded, burly man pondered for a moment, turned around and looked at the Jadian people, said, "Then we will capture these Jadian juniors and hand them over to Vampire Senior. That will do." The others nodded and agreed. Kiheo saw that they were so arrogant. He was even more careful. He quietly said to the 3 behind him, "These people seem to be the masterminds of the evil faction here. I'm afraid their skills are higher than those few just now. Everyone must be careful." Shah Danon answered, turned his head, and saw Ainan's eyes glanced at the wound on his shoulder. He startled. Then Ainan moved her eyes away. At this time, the burly man took a step forward and said to the Jadian people, "I advise the few of you to surrender. Otherwise, when we make our move later, your bones will be broken and your tendons will be broken, and you will suffer physical pain." Kevin snorted. Before he could say anything, Ainan said coldly, "Evil clowns still dare to be arrogant. Today is the day you die." Kevin and Issa clapped at the same time, said, "Lu Shimi is right." "Exactly." The man's face changed. His face was as cold as frost, said coldly, "It is you who are looking for death." Shah Danon did not see what he did. He just stared at the 4 people. Shah Danon was on guard. Suddenly, he saw the man's right eye suddenly doubled in size and turned into crimson red. The giant eye appeared on his face. It was both scary and funny. Just as he was feeling puzzled, a beam of red light suddenly shot out from the huge crimson eye of the burly man and shot towards him. The Jadians noticed his strange look. They already took note of it. Kevin immediately summoned frozen ice. Crack, crack. 2 ice walls formed in front of him. Unexpectedly, the red light seemed to contain a fiendish power. A moment later, it hit the ice wall and instantly melted a small hole in the ice wall. It went straight through the ice wall and silently rushed over like a hot knife through butter. Kevin was shocked and didn't have time to react. He immediately used the glacial immortal sword to block in front of everyone. The red light hit the glacial immortal sword and flashed twice before disappearing in the white light of the sword. But Kevin's body trembled. He saw that on his frozen ice celestial sword, the originally pure white blade was now dyed with a faint dark red color. The ice sword trembled slightly, as if it was attacked by an evil spirit. Kevin felt pain in his heart. "Actually, As a cultivator, which one of them did not value their talismans very much? However, he didn't have the time to think too much at this moment. The moment the red light disappeared, the man in the distance shot out another red light from his huge red eyes. When it collided with the two ice walls, it also soundlessly created two holes. Moreover, its momentum didn't decrease in the slightest as it continued to attack the four of them. Kevern frowned. Frozen ice flashed with white light. He met the red light in the air. In a blink of an eye, the red light disappeared. But there was another red mark on frozen ice. In the distance, the burly man did not make a sound. His red eyes were like arrows, shooting out red beams at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, they arrived. Kevern blocked them one by one, but the dark red color increased. The white light of the frozen ice, celestial sword, also dimmed. Zheng Shushu was the first to rush out. He raised his magic weapon, the celestial sword Xian Yuan, and was about to rush out from the side. Unexpectedly, the big man only turned his head slightly, and a red light shot out from his red eyes towards him. Zheng Shushu could not dodge in time, so he had to raise the celestial sword Xian Yuan in the air to block the strange red light. In midair, the Xian Yuan immortal sword glowed with a faint purple radiance, immediately dispersing the red radiance. However, a red mark also appeared on the body of the sword like a bone-piercing awl. The Xian Yuan immortal sword immediately trembled slightly. Issa felt a murderous aura coming from his sword. It seemed to want to invade his body. Luckily, he was far away and the power was not strong. Xian Yuan immediately emitted an auspicious aura to counteract the murderous aura. But because of this, he could not take another step forward. He looked at the man standing leisurely in the distance, slightly shaking his head. That crimson eye continued to shoot out red rays, nailing Kevern and Issa to the ground, not allowing them to move an inch. As the red marks gradually increased, the two of them felt that the evil energy from the celestial sword was getting heavier and heavier. Using the celestial sword as a medium, the evil energy slowly invaded their bodies. Chapter 65. Sha Danan had no way to retreat. Although Kevern and Issa were in his eyes, he could not do anything. He could only take out the fire stick and face it head-on. In midair, the red light and the green light of the fire stick collided and disappeared. Sha Danan felt a strong force came from the air. His body shook, but other than that, he did not feel anything strange. He hurriedly looked at the fire stick, only to see that the black fire stick was the same as usual. There were no red marks on it. Although the fire stick was still ugly, Sha Danan was overjoyed. He quickly stepped forward, but the evil faction people in the distance were all startled. One after another looked over. That big man exclaimed. A red light shot out from his huge eyes. The fire stick met it. The green and red light collided in midair. After a moment, the red light disappeared. The fire stick shook a little, but it was still safe. Sha Danan was relieved. He thought his fire stick was ugly, but as the saying goes, a lowly person's life is hard. It seems like the Esper is the same. His two Shixiang swords are beautiful and noble, but not as tough as his lowly item. His mind was filled with all kinds of thoughts, but his feet did not stop. He slowly approached the man. The man's relaxed, but because of the terrifying giant eye on his face, relaxed became disgusting. Expression had disappeared. Most of his attention was on Sha Danan, who seemed to be the weakest. He only shot a red light at Kevern and Issa every once in a while to stop them from moving forward. But he kept shooting at Sha Danan. Every time the red light flashed, although it was obvious Sha Danan was struggling, the black fire stick was not harmed. The ferocious energy on the red light did not seem to affect the young man. Under everyone's gaze, Sha Danan approached step by step. In the blink of an eye, the burly man's forehead was already covered in sweat. In his heart, he could not understand why the scarlet demon eye that he had spent 300 years of painstaking effort to cultivate was so effective against those immortal treasures. Why was it unable to do anything to this seemingly ordinary fire stick? Actually, he did not know that the red devil eye was extremely powerful. When the ferocious energy hit on Kevern and other swords, it could pollute their spiritual energy. Using the sword as the path, it could slowly force the ferocious energy into their body. From the beginning, they were in an invincible position, but Shah Danan's ugly fire stick was actually the Falcon's most ferocious, sinister orb, and the unknown black stick in the valley behind Bamboo Peak. It was smelted with Shah Danan's blood. Just based on the ferocious energy, the sinister orb alone was many times stronger than the Red Devil Eye. Not to mention the nameless black stick, which was as ferocious as sinister orb. The two ferocious objects were fused into one, restraining each other. The ferocious energy was restrained. Also, it contained Shah Danan's blood, so only Shah Danan could activate it. Because of this, he was able to hide it from the elders of Jade, and Shah Danan was able to come back from the gates of hell. But at this moment, the man wanted to use the red light from the Red Devil Eye to attack the fire stick. Of course, it was useless. Shah Danan was still young and ignorant. He did not know he had a powerful artifact on him. If it was the Falcon ancestor Elder Blackheart, with just a sinister orb, he only needed to wave it a few times, and the man's blood would be sucked dry. Only the Red Devil Eye was left on his body. But no one here could think of these unimaginable things. The man was focused on the enemy, but he still could not stop Shah Danan from slowly approaching. The young man who was silent from the beginning suddenly sneered. "Nien boss, your Red Devil Eye looks good, but it is useless. It can't even defeat a few Jadian juniors. And you scolded Wild Dog like that. I think you should just give me your faction master position." The man and the young woman's face changed. The beautiful young woman frowned first. "Lin Feng, friend, now we are facing a powerful enemy. How can you say such words?" That evil-looking Lin Feng glanced sideways at the Qing Yun sect people. When he saw Anan, he specially took another look, then sneered and said, "These yellow-haired brats are also considered as great enemies. Then on what basis does our Bloodforger Hall still have a foothold in the celestial sects and holy sects, and still talk about restoring the great cause established by Elder Blackheart 1,000 years ago?" The man named Nien shot a red light at Shah Danan, temporarily stopped him from moving forward. Then he said angrily to Lin Feng, "What else can you do besides boasting? Why don't you come and try?" A strange smile appeared on Lin Feng's pale face, said, "Okay, I will make you convinced." She took out a gold-painted fan from her bosom and fanned herself. The Qing Yun sect people all heard their conversation towards this young man who was filled with evil aura. They all became more vigilant, but after a long time, they saw this young man was only waving his fan unhurriedly, looking very suave, but not moving at all. They were all stunned. Could it be that Lin Feng only knows how to boast? Nien leader was angered to death, said angrily, "Lin Feng, if you don't have the ability, then stand aside. I can deal with these Jadians. You don't need to talk to me coldly. Why don't you look at your own ability?" Lin Feng's face changed, snorted coldly, "I don't want to join hands with you. It is not a fair fight. But if I don't show you what I have, you think I am lying to you?" As he spoke, he casually tossed the gold-painted fan in his hand into the air. The entire fan emitted a faint golden light in the air, and with a swoosh, it opened. On the gold-painted fan, there was a mountain, a river, and a dapeng. The brushwork was delicate and lifelike. Wind rose, clouds surged, thunder roared, lightning flashed. This place was deep underground. In the ancient cave, there should not be such a scene. But at this moment, the four Jadians could see it. While they were still in shock, suddenly a loud sound was heard. That treasured fan trembled in midair. The next moment, the huge mountain in the fan's painting actually moved out, grew with the wind. In the rumbling sound, it grew into 100 zhongs tall hill, almost filling up this huge space, and then like Mount Tai pressing down on the four Qing Yun sect people. Shah Danan was shocked, but seeing the giant was pressing down on him, there was no way he could resist it. He used all his strength to fly backward. The mountain was pressing down on him, but half of his body was still in it. He was about to be pressed in half. Suddenly his collar was pulled by someone, and he was pulled out. Shah Danan turned his head and saw it was Kevern who saved his life. At this moment of life and death, his heart was filled with bitterness. But he still said quietly, "Thank you, Qi Shi Xiang." Kevern did not know what Shah Danan was thinking. He nodded his head with a serious face. His position was a bit lower than Shah Danon, so he pulled Shah Danon's hand. However, the huge hill that suddenly appeared in front of them gave him a headache. As the hill came crashing down, the ground shook violently and the stone walls trembled. Even the dome of rock that was over 1,000 feet tall fell like rain. The power was so great that it was frightening. Zhang Shushu also retreated, but his face was full of shock as he said in shock, "Mountain and river fan. That is Mount Jiesher's old Finghuez Esper. How did it fall into this person's hand?" Everyone was surprised. Shah Danon was fine, but Kevin had a lot of experience. He knew old Fengyue was a famous cultivator in East Mount Jiesher. His cultivation was high, quite famous in the world of cultivation. Usually he was in between good and evil. He was not evil and stood aloof from worldly affairs. So both good and evil did not provoke him. But they did not expect this young man would appear among the heretics with old Finghuez Esper, just when everyone was bewildered and uncertain. The large mountain mercilessly soared into the sky once more. It was unknown exactly how much Fa Li was required to be able to lift such an enormous object. Behind them was the stone wall. There was no way to retreat. Stones were falling like rain on the mountain. Lightning flashed and thunder roared. At this moment of life and death, the Jadians were in a panic. Kevin gritted his teeth and was about to step forward and use Union Mirror to protect them. He intended to resist the force of the mountain. Suddenly, a blue shadow flashed. Anan appeared in front of them. She whistled. The blue light brightened. Eolin Firmus was unsheathed. The divine energy shot up to the ceiling. The thunder in the sky became even more urgent. The huge mountain came crashing down with an invincible momentum. It looked like it was going to crush the four of them into meat patties. Anan's face was like frost. Her long hair danced in the wind. She was like a fairy from the ninth heaven. Aeolian firmaments trembled slightly, as if sensing its master's thoughts, like an angry dragon leaping into the sky. It soared into the sky, tens of thousands of rays of blue light instantly illuminating the entire huge cave, merging into one in the air. The sword slashed towards the huge mountain. Zing! Sand and stones flew, the wind howled. Everyone stared at the sky, only to see a huge airflow, almost like a tangible object, violently surging in all directions. Anan, who was in midair, his face turned pale, his entire body was thrown into the stone wall by the huge force. However, the mountain was heavily slashed by the blue light beam, and its downward momentum stopped. It trembled a few times in the air, and after a loud sound, it actually shrank back. In a moment, the entire mountain turned into nothingness and reappeared in the mountain and river fan in the midst of flying sand and stones. That evil-looking young man Lin Feng glanced at the mountain and river fan, his brows immediately furrowing. On the image, the originally majestic mountain now had a large crack from the top to the middle of the mountain. The originally harmonious surface of the fan seemed to have been broken, looking a bit stiff. At Jadian's side, Aeolian Firmus flew back like it was alive. Anan slid down from the stone wall. When she landed, she felt her feet were soft. She almost sat on the ground. Luckily, the others were already there. Shah Danon saw it and held her. Anan was gasping for breath. She was a strong person. She was going to push Shah Danon away. But when her hand was halfway, she felt her lips were hot. Blood came out. The red blood flowed across her smooth skin. The red and white stained each other. It was a breathtaking beauty. Shah Danon startled. Then he heard Lin Feng scolded angrily. "You stinky woman. You dare to destroy my Esper. Even if you die 10 times, it is not enough to pay." While he was speaking, the evil man already rose into the air. The golden light of the mountain rive fan was shining. It did not match his evil aura, but it still opened and closed in the air. At far, Nian Boss had stopped emitting red light. The red devil eye also returned to normal, standing where it was. The beautiful young lady at the side took a step forward, glanced at Jade and Anan, whispered, "Did you see it clearly?" Chapter 66. Nian Boss said seriously, "It is Aeolian Firmus. The young woman snorted. Can't believe such a divine item is in the hands of this junior. Nian leader looked at Lin Feng, who was fighting with the Qing Yun sect people, said, Tianya Celestial Sword is the Nine Heavens celestial weapon. Back then, our Blood Forger Hall founder Elder Blackheart was defeated by this sword. Today, no matter what, we must seize this celestial sword. The young woman nodded, said, Then Lin Feng. Nian leader sneered. This brat has always been arrogant, because he is related to ancestor Feng Yu. If it wasn't for the fact that we are in dire need of manpower, I wouldn't have let him go. Let him be the vanguard. You, and I will find an opportunity to snatch the divine sword. The young woman nodded and focused her attention on the battlefield. Every time fan of mountain and river waved, there would be a huge storm. The wind blew the stones toward the four Jadians. But every time it got near, it was blocked by Kevern and Issa. The sudden appearance of the mountain caught everyone off guard, and they were almost at a loss of what to do. But now they could see that these two people had extraordinary skills. Kevern needn't say, his frozen ice sword flashed with a white light, blocking waves after waves of wind. And Issa, who was standing on the other side, finally revealed his true abilities. The Xin Yuan sword emitting a faint purple light under Kevern's cover flashed with purple light, every time it burrowed into the gaps in the wind like a poisonous snake. Lin Feng was almost injured by this purple light if he wasn't careful. He could only be careful and deal with it. For a moment, the three of them were actually tied. It was hard to tell who was better. Sha Danan stood at the back, still holding Anan. He watched Kevern and the others duel. Seeing Kevern was able to use the sword perfectly, and his usage of Taoism was far beyond him, Sha Danan couldn't help but admire him. All this while, he had only practiced the basic skills of Tai Chi Xian Qing Dao. Only when he was about to leave the mountain did Suru impart some practical skills to him. Of course, he was not as good as Kevern. While he was absorbed in watching, he suddenly felt his arm loosened. Anan had rested for a while. She stood up and left his support. Sha Danan saw her jade-like white face was now pale. He couldn't help but ask, Are you okay, Lu Shiji? Anan looked at him, wiped the blood from her lips, shook her head, but did not say anything. Sha Danan was familiar with the Ice Beauty style since he knew her. Of course he would not ask further. Besides, he was always respectful to this beautiful lady. He turned his face and looked at the field. Unexpectedly, when he turned his head, he suddenly heard Anan exclaimed. He looked over in shock. A black rope suddenly appeared from the stone wall behind where he and Anan were standing, swiftly tied Anan's hands to his side. Unable to move, the next moment a female figure appeared from the stone wall. It was that beautiful young lady who was standing far away. She giggled and said, Little sister, you're so beautiful that I can't help but feel pity for you. This fairy binding rope was specially prepared for you righteous immortals. Sha Danan saw the pain on Anan's face. The celestial bind rope had already sunk deep into her flesh. The pain was imaginable. But before he could react, a whistling sound was heard in the air. Nian leader pounced down, stretched out his hand, and grabbed towards the Tianya on Lu Sueki's back. Sha Danan could not let him do anything. Fire Stick rose into the air and charged at Nian Boss. Nian Boss saw it was the strange black stick again. He was a little afraid. His body tilted and stopped, fell on the ground. At this time, Kevern and Issa, who were in front, heard the noise and turned their heads to take a look. Their faces turned pale with fright and were about to turn back to help. But Lin Feng saw the two's strange movements and thought to himself that if I let you guys come and go as you please, then wouldn't I lose all face in front of Nian Boss? Right then the mountain and river fan whistled into the wind, one wave after another. Kevern and Tseng actually couldn't come out for a moment. Sha Danan temporarily forced Nian Boss back. Without hesitation, he tilted his body and charged at the beautiful young woman with the fire stick. But the young woman smiled and swung the rope in her hand. Anan was uncontrollably blocked in front of her. Sha Danan was surprised. He almost could not stop it. The fire stick stopped 3 inches in front of Anan. The light reflected on her face turned green. Not waiting for Sha Danan to catch his breath, he heard 2 more sound of wind behind him. Sha Danan hurriedly rushed forward and barely dodged it. cynical dialectian, and that tall Lu Gao also took advantage of the situation and rushed forward. Nian Boss was eager to get the treasure, did not care about his identity, and also rushed forward. Sha Danan, 1 against 3, immediately fell into a hard battle. If not because Nian Boss was a little afraid of the fire stick, and cynical and Lu Gao saw the horrible scene of the fire stick sucking blood, they were a little afraid and did not dare to attack too hard. Sha Danan would have already lost. But even so, after a few rounds, under the attack of 3 Esper in the sky, Sha Danan was already in danger. And the most troublesome thing was the beautiful young woman was watching, but once Sha Danan tried to counterattack, her arm would shake and throw Anan into the battle. Sha Danan could only withdraw his arms and legs. He was defeated again and again, and was about to be injured by the 3 heretics. Under the celestial bind rope, Anan struggled, but it was useless. She saw the young woman smiling proudly behind her, and Sha Danan was in danger because he was afraid of hurting her. Anan's face became paler. Her mind was agitated. A mouthful of blood spurted out from her throat, spilled on her clothes. The red spots were shocking to the eye. Sha Danan heard the sound and saw it. He thought Anan was wounded by the celestial binding rope. Under the surprise, he couldn't care much anymore. Black gas rose from the fire stick and shot at the beautiful young woman like lightning. The young woman did not expect Sha Danan would not care about his own safety and attack. She was caught off guard. Seeing the fire stick was about to hit her, she quickly rose into the air and dodged it. But at the same time, Sha Danan's back was exposed. Nian Boss's red devil, I shot out a red light. Cynical dialections, Fong Esper, and Lu Gao's yellow flying sword hit Sha Danan's back. Sha Danan's eyes darkened, almost fainted. After the severe pain, his body was almost numb. His entire body flew straight forward. In midair, blood was spat out from his mouth. Anan saw it. She bit her lips. Suddenly, she felt the celestial bind loosened. The beautiful young woman was distracted by Sha Danan and forgot to control the celestial bind. Lu Sweki let out a clear whistle. Both of her hands stretched out in the limited space, forming orchid finger gestures. Tianya's celestial sword automatically unsheathed. Blue light swept across the horizon. Ka-ka, 2 sounds immediately forced the celestial binding rope back. But under the blade of Aeolian Firmus, the normal-looking celestial bind was extremely tough. It cannot be cut, but it was still making ZZ sound. The young woman was worried about her treasure and was shocked by the power of Aeolian Firmus. She quickly took back the celestial bind. Once Anan was free, although her body was still sore, she immediately rose into the air and caught Sha Danan's body. However, before the 2 of them had the chance to catch their breath, Nian Boss and the other 2 had already followed them. The blue light of Aeolian Firmus flashed, returned to Anan, and protected her master. But Anan's face was as pale as paper. Her body was shaking. At that moment, suddenly a sound came from afar, followed by a cry of pain. Lin Feng shouted angrily, "Jade Jr., you dare to hurt me. Watch my Esper." Boom! Resounded in every corner of the large cave. While everyone was still in state of shock, Nian Boss suddenly stopped and shouted, "Brother Lin, you can't." Before he finished speaking, everyone felt the mountain beneath their feet shake. Looking again at Lin Feng's hand, the great river in the mountain and river fan had actually disappeared from the picture in the fan. Wah! Following a deafening boom, the ground where everyone was standing cracked open. In an instant, a huge pillar of water shot out from the depths of the ground. The force was so great that even the huge rocks were blown into the air. Only the huge rock in front of them, with the words "Forsaken Abyss" carved on it, did not move at all. The 4 Jadians were blown away by the great power. Anan's hand loosened. At that moment, she suddenly felt her heart sink. Sha Danan's blood-stained body floated to the outside. In front of them was the mysterious dark abyss. She looked at it in midair. Just for a moment, but it was like the past, scene by scene, flashed across her mind. On Mount Jadian's Peak of Widows, the young man who blushed when he saw her drawing lots. During the contest, in the lightning storm, the eyes that suddenly softened. The person who spat blood for her risked everything to save her. A large stone fell on her head. Ainen gritted her teeth, her face cold. She used her last bit of strength to push on the large stone, change her direction, flew towards Shah Danon. The stones were like rain. The water dragon was ferocious. But all of this seemed to be at the edge of the sky. Aeolian Firmus glowed with faint blue light, followed its master. After avoiding several stones, Ainen caught up with Shah Danon. She grabbed his hand and was about to pull him back, but she felt the last bit of strength in her body left her. Is she here to save me? Shah Danon saw Ainen in his blurred eyes. He said in his heart. Suddenly, he and Ainen had flown past the glaring boulder engraved with the words Forsaken Abyss and landed on the abyss. Then they fell. Lusweki seemed to have lost consciousness. She closed her eyes and rolled to the side. Her fair face seemed to have a trace of gratification. Before Shah Danon fell into the eternal dark abyss, at the last moment when he was at the light, he heard a Buddhist chant. Then the golden light brightened. The next moment, he fell into darkness. The boundless darkness seemed eternal. He couldn't even see a trace of the woman who was right next to him. But at the last moment before he lost consciousness, he knew Ainen and his hand were still holding together very, very tight. He could even faintly feel that hand at this moment was so cold, so cold. Boundless darkness engulfed everything. Chapter 67. According to legend, the world was originally dark. Then 48,000 years later, Pangu, the giant god, opened the world, created the mountains and rivers. Then another 48,000 years later, Niwa created the human. According to legend, the first beam of light in the world was born in the darkest place. Shah Danon felt his body was very cold. The cold went into his bones. That kind of coldness, not only his body, but also his heart, like he was about to die. But he did not feel afraid, no fear at all. He only felt a tiredness that he had never felt before, like he did not even have the strength to open his eyes. Strangely, when his body was extremely tired and powerless, his mind gradually became clear. It was as if something was surrounding him. It was very gentle and careful, but it was as cold as ice, slowly sucking the heat from his body. At the same time, it brought with it a strange feeling of comfort that made him want to fall asleep in comfort. If it wasn't for the familiar and cold aura rising from his right hand, as if it was protecting its master, if it wasn't for the fact that he suddenly felt that in his left hand, he was still holding an ice-cold and soft hand. In the tiredness, he opened his eyes bit by bit. That was a beam of light in the eternal darkness. In the endless and endless darkness, only in front of Shah Danon, a light quietly lit up. That was a faint white light. It floated in the darkness, wrapped around Shah Danon, like the most gentle woman holding her beloved lover, lingering with him like this. It was also like a light smoke with a bit of illusory in midair next to Shah Danon. It gradually turned into a beautiful and sad face, kissing toward the young man's lips. Between the lips, there was a faint fragrance, a bit of confusion, and also only coldness. The coldness that entered the heart. The fire stick rose up, the green light blocked in front of Shah Danon. The white light that turned into the beautiful face seemed to be a bit afraid of it, and had to step back. Shah Danon's body shook, then realized what happened. He screamed, "Nether spirit!" According to ancient legend, when people grow old and die, only the soul will not perish. At the end of life, the soul will leave the body and be reincarnated. Life and death, endless cycle. However, in this world, there are vengeful spirits. Because of greed, anger, and infatuation, because of fear, evil, and fear. Longing for the world, looking back to the past, not willing to be reincarnated, they are called nether spirit. Of course, nether spirit is the soul of Een, naturally like to live in damp place. In Forsaken Abyss, it is dark and damp. It is not strange to have such ghosts. But Shah Danon had never seen such thing in his life. When he was a child in Grass Temple Village, he heard the adults say there are ghosts in this world. Later on in Bamboo Peak, he heard his Shixiangs say it is nether spirit. His heart was a little afraid. Now that he saw it, He felt cold from head to toe. His cry only traveled far into the darkness. In the surrounding pitch-black darkness, his voice seemed light. After a long time, there was a faint echo. Also with his cry, it seemed like it startled something. In the darkness around him, another light silently brightened. Shah Danon felt his heart jumped. Then it was like the heart in his chest had stopped. He held his breath, watching a beam of white light that was almost the same as the nether spirit brightened in the darkness. Then the left side brightened, the right side brightened, the front side brightened, the back side brightened, even the top of his head was also brightened, flashing the faint white light. Countless of nether spirits, as if awakened from their long slumber, felt the warmth of the human body for the first time in hundreds of years. They gathered here. The white light like smoke floated, turned into countless faces, male or female, old or young, beautiful or ugly. But at this moment, in Shah Danon's eyes, there was only one feeling: coldness. His scalp went numb at the thought of being surrounded by countless spirits at the same time. But fortunately, after the initial shock, he found the nether spirits seemed to be afraid of the fire stick in front of him. They did not dare to get close to the green light emitted by the fire stick. But before Shah Danon could relax, the nether spirits floating in the air seemed to have found something. They all flew to the left side of Shah Danon. Shah Danon startled, then his face paled. The soft hand he was holding in his left hand was gradually becoming cold. He quickly pulled. A sound of water was heard. Anan was pulled to his side. With the surrounding light, Shah Danon could see Anan's face was pale, her eyes were closed, but her breathing was still normal. She did not seem to have any wound on her body. Then he was relieved. He looked around and carefully observed the surrounding environment. He and the still unconscious Lu Sweki. Right now, for some reason, they were at the edge of a bay. In the darkness, they could not see the size of the water and did not know if this was a small pond or a big lake or the legendary huge deep underground sea. Shah Danon did not know why he suddenly had this idea. But in the water, he could feel the water was not still. The waves of tide was like a gentle hand caressing his body. But the water was really bone-chilling. Shah Danon stood up with difficulty. If they stay here, even if they will not be harmed by the nether spirits, they will be frozen to death in the water. When he stood up, he felt dizzy. His body could not help but staggered. When he was on the platform, his back was hit by Nien Boss, Cynical Dialectian, and Lu Gao at the same time. The injury was not light. At the same time, the green light of the fire stick dimmed a little as if it sensed something. Almost at the same time, the ghostly lights of the countless spirits in the surroundings lit up at the same time. The faces of the spirits that had taken human form revealed an infinite desire. Shah Danon was surprised. He quickly calmed his mind. The light of the fire stick brightened again and shocked the nether spirits. Shah Danon strenuously pulled Anan to the shore. This short distance made him feel like it was so long. Finally, they reached the hard ground. Shah Danon sat on the ground, panting. Around them, countless of nether spirits were floating around the green light of the fire stick. Shah Danon stared at the floating light. He remembered the last memory before he fainted. He remembered Anan flew to him and held his hand. He remembered when they fell into the endless dark abyss. He could even vaguely remember, before he fainted, there was a familiar Buddhist chant on the platform. That should be Fezan Shi Xiang, and the others arrived. Shah Danon murmured in his mind. With the help of the four of them, plus Kevern and Isa's cultivation, there should be no problem. If Qi Shi Xiang is fine, Ling'er Shiji will not be sad. But, almost at the same time, Shah Danon asked himself, if I die, will Ling'er Shiji be sad? Perhaps she will be sad. After all these years, he had been with her day and night. He knew this Shiji, who was beautiful and strong on the outside, actually has a soft and weak side in her heart. If she heard that Shah Danon Shidi died, she would also shed some tears. He must be hurt too, right? If they could not find his body, they would definitely erect a grave for him on Big Bamboo Peak. How many times will she come to the grave in the future? If so, will he be like the nether spirits, missing her, not willing to be reborn, lingering in the grave, quietly waiting for the figure in his memory. In the silence of the darkness, the young man sighed in a low, unbeknownst to anyone. Eh. She let out a soft call, slowly woke up, opened her eyes. For thousands of years, there was an old question. If you wake up from a long sleep, who is the first person you want to see? No one knew if Anan ever heard this seemingly boring question. But at this moment, reflected in her eyes, in the faint white light, Shah Danan's concerned eyes. Chapter 68. That was the only warmth in the darkness. Shah Danan was overjoyed, said happily, "You woke up, Lu Shiji." Lu Sweki did not answer immediately. She seemed to be in a daze for a moment, but very quickly she returned to normal. Her expression also recovered from the initial confusion to a somewhat cold and frosty expression. But as she looked around, she couldn't help but be moved again. "Nether spirit," Anan screamed just like Shah Danan. Shah Danan nodded, comforted her. "Yes, but don't be afraid. They seem to be afraid of my fire stick. It should be fine for now." Anan also noticed the countless of nether spirits did not attack them. They only wandered around, seemed to be afraid of Shah Danan's short black stick. She calmed down and asked, "What is your esper called? Why is it so powerful?" Shah Danan blushed, said, I call it fire stick. Also, I don't know why it is so powerful." Anan asked curiously, "Fire stick?" Shah Danan looked at the lady in front of him. In the faint white light, her skin like snow. Although pale, it made her even more beautiful. He lowered his head, said, "Yes, I am in charge of cooking at Bamboo Peak. Use it to make fire stick." Lu Sweki was speechless for a moment, stared blankly at that ugly black stick in the air. After a long while quietly said, "Fire stick. I'm taught by my master, train hard, and have Aeolian firmus, but I lost a fire stick?" Shah Danan's heart jumped. Anan's face became paler. Almost no blood could be seen. He said, "Shiji, you won that time. And I heard if you did not exhaust too much of your energy, you may not lose to Kevin Shixiang in the final." The more he spoke, the softer his voice became. Towards the end, it gradually became silent, because Anan silently raised her head, coldly looked at him. He actually could not continue. The faint white light shined on their figures. Anan lowered her head again, took a deep breath, said, "How do we luckily escape?" Shah Danan was startled, also confused, said, "I don't know." Then he thought of something and pointed at the edge of the bay, saying, "But when I woke up, both of us were lying by the water. Could it be that we were lucky enough to fall into the water and not die, and were washed ashore by the tide?" Lu Sweki looked in the direction he pointed. Against the faint white light emitted by the Een spirit, she saw water in the distance. She could also faintly hear the sha-sha sound of the tide crashing against the shore. On the other hand, although the clothes on his body were mostly dry, they were still somewhat wet and stuck to his body, making him feel cold. If Shah Danan did not pull her to the shore, she would be frozen to death before she could wake up. "Thank you," Lu Sweki suddenly said in a low voice. Shah Danan, startled, quickly waved his hand and smiled. "It's okay, it's not off." Suddenly, both of them were stunned. Between the two of them, their hands were still tightly clasped at this moment. It was like their flesh and blood were connected, like it had been like this for many years. There was no feeling at all. It was supposed to be like this, but both of them had forgotten it. Lu slowly took back her hand. Shah Danan smiled embarrassedly, waving his hand, but did not know where to put it. After a while, Lu Sweki spoke. "Before you fell down, you were heavily attacked by the Falcon heretics. How do you feel now?" Shah Danan was relieved. Hearing the Ice Lady did not seem to blame him, he quickly said, "Not bad, not bad." Lu Sweki said, "Can you still use sword?" Shah Danan channeled his energy, then felt pain in his body. He smiled bitterly and shook his head. Lu Sweki looked at him, said, "I can't either. We need to check around and see if there is any way out. If we keep waiting like this, we will be surrounded by the nether spirits. Sooner or later, we will be sucked dry by them." Shah Danan gasped, nodded, "Yes." Lu Sweki stood up and checked her body. There was no big wound, but her meridians and blood were a bit messy. Her body was powerless. It seemed like the rebound from the battle with Fan of Mountain and River was too strong, and the Aeolian firmus that she cared about the most had returned to the sheath on her back. She turned her head and looked at Shaw Dannon. He was struggling to stand up. His body was not very agile. Clearly, he was still troubled by his injury. At the same time, she knew how much mental strength he used to pull her out from the water. "What level of pure essence is your pure essence at?" Lou Swecky suddenly asked Shaw Dannon. Shaw Dannon, startled, did not speak. Lou thought he did not answer on purpose. She turned her head, said lightly, "It doesn't matter if you don't answer. But I heard Master said your cultivation is only at the 4th level. That day it was because of that strange Esper's power. I did not believe it. Today I saw it with my own eyes. If not because your cultivation is high and your meridians are strong, you would have been defeated by the Falcon heretics." Shaw Dannon scratched his head. He did not know what to say, because he was also confused about his own cultivation, so he said it vaguely. Actually, Lou did not know that if only based on the cultivation of pure essence, Shaw Dannon's cultivation was only at the 4th level, which was the level where he could use the Esper. But inside Shaw Dannon's body, there was another Buddhist incantation, Fawn Wisdom, which was the key. Buddhist cultivation was more focused on understanding the nature of self than Taoism. Shaw Dannon had been cultivating Fawn Wisdom for 5 years. Although his cultivation was still shallow, the foundation of his meridians was very strong. Compared to the peerless incantations of Buddhism and Taoism, he was far better than the young disciples of the same faction. And it was precisely because of this that he suffered a heavy blow from the evil cult sorcerer. Taiji Xianxing Wei blocked a layer of protection. Great Brahmin wisdom blocked another layer at the same time. Only then did he luckily survive. They stood up. Shaw Dannon recalled the fire stick back into his hand. The cyan light shined and surrounded them. Anan pondered for a moment, then pointed at the opposite direction of the water. They walked into the endless darkness. As they walked, they did not know how long they had walked. This direction seemed to have no end. After a long while, the two of them were still walking on empty ground. In the forsaken abyss, other than being shockingly huge, there was not a single trace of life. There were only nether spirits flying around them, still greedy for the taste of blood and flesh, floating up and down silently. Shaw Dannon and Anan's face became heavier as they walked. They could feel the nether energy around them was like tide. Shaw Dannon felt his blood was boiling, and a wave of dizziness came upon him. Although his foundation was strong, but his cultivation was not high. Receiving the attack from Yen Boss, Cynical Dialectian, and Lu Gao at the same time, the damage to his meridians was great. After a moment, Anan also noticed something wrong with Shaw Dannon. Asked, "What happened to you?" Shaw Dannon forced a smile, said, "I am fine, let's go." Anan looked at him, said, "Do you want to rest?" Before she could finish the word rest, Shaw Dannon's body suddenly swayed, his body softened and fell down. The fire stick in his hand also quickly dimmed along with his falling body. Anan was surprised and quickly held him. Shaw Dannon had fainted. Her hand was cold, and she realized Shaw Dannon had fainted. At that moment, she, who was known for her calmness among her fellow disciples, also panicked. Then she thought of another more terrifying problem. The fire stick lost its effect. What could she use to defend against the countless of nether spirits? Almost at the same time Lou Swecky thought of this question, the surrounding Een spirits that were emitting faint white light also seemed to be startled. Then, in front of them, two living bodies of flesh and blood stood there without the slightest bit of defense. In the darkness, there seemed to be countless voices laughing and roaring at the same time. Countless Een spirits seemed to freeze in midair for a moment. Then, like greedy beasts, they rushed towards the two helpless people standing in the darkness. Chapter 69. Clang! It was a clear sound in the darkness. Anan's face was as cold as frost. She stood in front of Shaw Dannon and pulled out her sword. Aeolian firmus was unsheathed. The blue light rose. The pure and bright light brightened up the dark world. All of the nether spirit's light lost its luster before the blue light. Even so, the nether spirits were not afraid and still charged at them from all directions. Anan scolded. A trace of pain flashed across her pale face, but it was immediately replaced by a stronger look. The Tianya celestial soared under its master's control. Blue light blossomed. The radiance was boundless, sweeping across the nether spirits that were charging over. At the moment when the blue light touched the nether spirits, there was a sizzling sound similar to frying. The first dozens of nether spirits turned into nothingness, their souls scattered. The sound echoed in the empty and dark place, making one's hair stand on end. Although Aeolian Firmus was powerful, it could not scare off the rest of the nether spirits. At the same time, when Anan attacked, several nether spirits leaped at Shah Danan from behind. Anan saw it from the corner of her eyes. She turned back and swept Aeolian Firmus across Shah Danan's body and dispersed the nether spirits. But the number of nether spirits were too many. It was impossible to kill them all. Anan was already injured. After a few rounds, she was sweating and breathing heavily. But the ghost faces were dancing and crying around her. The blue light of Aeolian Firmus weakened. Anan gritted her teeth, but her legs still softened, and she fell next to Shah Danan. The nether spirits were crying proudly in the howling. The ghostly light brightened, the nether energy weaved. Anan turned her head and looked at Shah Danan. Although that young man was unconscious, there was pain on his face. Was he thinking of something sad? Anan murmured quietly, "Can't believe I will die together with you today." She sat up straight. Her face was pale, but she still did not give up. Her right hand curled, made orchid incantation gesture. Following her gesture, Aeolian Firmus paused in midair, then suddenly stabbed into the ground in front of Anan. The blue light brightened again. A circle of light with Aeolian Firmus as the center appeared on the ground, surrounding Anan and Shah Danan. The surrounding spirits saw delicious flesh and blood right in front of them. How could they care less? One by one, they rushed forward. But a moment later, the circle of light on the ground suddenly swelled up, a blue light rose up, and a propitious steam rose up. The blue light seemed to have a mind of its own as it flashed over the top of the two people's heads in a circular arc, immediately blocking the spirits outside. But if people saw it, they could see the light of the circle was too weak. The propitious energy was also weak. It was just Anan's last struggle. Seeing that the delicacy was once again blocked, the sky full of nether spirits were enraged, the ghostly cries grew louder. Countless of nether spirits used all their strength to hit this fragile halo. Every time they hit, Anan's body would tremble. Her face would turn paler. The celestial sword's light would also dim a little. The halo that was originally 2 people tall in a short time was compressed to less than the size of a person. Lusweki's face was as pale as paper, looking at the sinister and hideous grins on the faces of the evil spirits outside the halo. Watching them open their huge mouths, she felt as if she had fallen into an ice cellar. At that moment, she suddenly heard Shah Danan, who was unconscious, suddenly mumbled something. Anan quickly turned her head. There was no words that could describe her feeling. She had been fighting with the nether spirits alone. Suddenly, she heard her companion's voice. There was a joy that she had never felt before in her heart. But before she could see Shah Danan's face clearly, a strange thing happened. The ground they were sitting on was a hard ground, but a large hole suddenly opened up where Shah Danan was. Shah Danan fell into it. Lusweki was stunned for a moment. The cave was pitch black, and he could not see how deep it was. He could only see a pair of huge and terrifying blood-red eyes flashing in the depths of the cave. The next moment, without any hesitation, the circle of light of Aeolian Firmus disappeared. In the howling of the nether spirits, Anan pulled up Aeolian Firmus. Without a word, she plunged into the dark hole. After a moment, all the nether spirits in midair followed. The shrill howling filled the hole. The muffled sound of impact sounded in the hole. After a moment, in the howling of the nether spirits, a sharp, long howl suddenly sounded. Roar! The howl was painful. It sounded like the angry howl of a wounded wild boar. After a moment, a giant figure leaped out from the hole. Then countless of nether spirits leaped out, flying in the sky. Ainin held Shah Danon with her left hand and leaped out from the ground. Blood came out from the corner of her mouth. The left half of her body was also red. It seemed like she was also injured. Shah Danon could only stand by relying on Ainin. But his eyes opened. The fire stick lit up again. Although it was weak, it still emitted a dark green light. The young man and woman, in this dark world, supported each other, relied on each other. Ainin looked at the sky, full of angry nether spirits that did not dare to come down. Her heart was filled with an indescribable joy. Although they were not out of danger, but it was good to have someone standing beside her. After that, their eyes landed on the giant shadow in front of them. Under the white light of the nether spirits, they smelled a strong, rotten smell and saw the appearance of the Yasho. It was a giant Yasho with the height of 2 people. It had a pig's head and dog's body. Its fangs were long and sharp. Its whole body was black. Its brown hair stood up like steel needles. Its giant eyes were blood red in the darkness. It looked like the Falcon heretic Nien boss Red Devil Eye. Note 1. The Yasho was panting heavily. Under its black and dirty fur, the flesh on its left front claw was torn open. It seemed like it was injured by Ainin, and it stared at the 2 humans who injured it. Its eyes shot out a deep hatred, as if it wanted to swallow them. The nether spirits were flying in the sky. Some flew past the Yasho, but they did not attack it. Clearly, they never interfered with each other. Ainin felt pain and tiredness all over her body. She almost wanted to fall down and sleep without thinking. But after several struggles, she still held on. She whispered to Shah Danon, "There are too many nether spirits and Yasho beasts here. We don't know what else will come out later. Let's retreat first." Shah Danon had no objection. He nodded and agreed. The 2 of them retreated. Unfortunately, with every step they took, the Een spirit in the sky would take a step forward. That demonic beast seemed unwilling to give up and actually followed them. The nether spirits were afraid of Shah Danon's fire stick, and the pig-headed Yasho was also afraid of them, but it did not want to give up. Zhang and Lu were already injured, and after going through a series of fierce battles in this gloomy and damp forsaken abyss, they were already extremely exhausted. At this moment, if it wasn't for the Een spirit and the demonic beast persistently pressing on, the 2 of them would probably have fainted the moment they relaxed their minds. But now they were facing a life and death situation. They did not know where the courage and strength came from. They managed to hold on until now. This forsaken abyss, which was unknown to the righteous faction, was actually an astonishingly huge abyss. The 2 of them had retreated for half a day, but they were still walking on empty ground. There was no sign of the precipice at all. They did not know when they fell. How did they fall to such a far place? But they did not have time to think about this question. Around them were the nether spirits and Yasho beasts. Life and death was only a moment away. While Shah Danon and Ainin were helpless, Shah Danon suddenly felt a pain on his back. He bumped into a hard object. They did not dare to underestimate the Yasho, so they only walked backward. Now that they bumped into it, Shah Danon was surprised. He quickly turned around and saw it was a big tree. The tree trunk was so thick that it would take at least 3 people to wrap their arms around it. Shah Danon was relieved. He said to Ainin, who was still looking at his back, "It's okay, just a tree dash." Before he finished, Shah Danon suddenly felt a pain on his throat. His neck was tied by a rope-like thing. He was twisted by a strong force. Lu Sweki was shocked. She turned around and exclaimed, "Tree demon." Note 2. The tree that was growing alone in the open space at this moment, all of the stationary branches moved like human arms, and the one that entangled Shah Danon was one of the thick branches. In the darkness, the dancing body of the tree demon was like the devil of the 9 nether. Shah Danon could feel the tree branch on his neck was getting tighter and tighter. He could not breathe. Ainin was about to help, but a loud roar came from far away. The pig-headed Yasho seized the opportunity and leaped up. Its large claws glowed with green light and slashed down on Shah Danon's head. It was probably poisonous. Chapter 70. Ainin had no choice but to turn around to block, but her body was blocked by it. She tried to save Shah Danon several times but failed. Instead, she was also in danger. Shah Danon was caught by the tree spirit. His throat was in great pain, But the tree spirit was making an unpleasant sound. Most likely it was happy. The tree branch that wrapped around his neck pulled him back to the tree. At the same time, several tree branches wrapped around his body. Only his hands could still move. He could not struggle anymore. Shah Danan's heart was burning. He looked at Ainin and found she could not even take care of herself. His soul almost left his body. On the tree spirit's trunk, a large mouth slowly opened. A pungent stench came out from it. The tree branch was pulling him into the mouth. That must be the tree spirit's mouth. Shah Danan shuddered. He never thought he would one day become a tree's fertilizer. This way of dying was really hard to accept. But now the arrow was already on the string. He was moving toward the mouth bit by bit. The stench was getting heavier. Cold sweat came down from Shah Danan's forehead. Seeing he was near the mouth, Shah Danan struggled with all his strength. He used his feet to hold the tree trunk and refused to move forward. Unfortunately, the tree spirit's strength was unusually strong. The tree branch pulled a few times. Then Shah Danan's strength was exhausted. He was sent to the mouth. The pungent stench hit him in the face. Don't know how many lives this tree spirit had killed. At this moment of life and death, Shah Danan struggled. He held the only weapon he had, the fire stick, and thrust it toward the tree spirit's mouth. The fire stick, especially the bead at the front, glowed with faint green light. The blunt fire stick was swung by Shah Danan and hit the tree spirit. It was like a divine weapon. It stabbed into the tree spirit's hard trunk like cutting vegetables. At that moment, the branches of the tree demon that were dancing all over the sky suddenly froze and stopped moving. Shah Danan startled. At the same time, a feeling of fear rose in his heart. A familiar, cold feeling flowed through his body. Then it brought a brand new energy. Threads of warmth flowed from the fire stick into Shah Danan's body. It was just like the time when Shah Danan fought vampire Jiang Lao San in the Cave of Fangs. Shah Danan was stunned in midair. He stared blankly at everything that was happening in front of him. The originally arrogant, and ferocious tree demon was pierced by an ugly-looking fire stick, and its huge body, which was disproportionate to the size of the fire stick, rapidly withered. All the branches, and even the trunk, seemed to have been sucked out of all the water. They shriveled and curled up, and the leaves fell like rain. After letting out the last roar of its life, the whole tree collapsed with a loud bang, and then it turned into dust. Shah Danan landed on the ground, lost in thought. He did not even need to channel his energy to know that the warm energy from the fire stick was beneficial to his body. His injured channels were nourished by the new warm energy. Daluo revolved. He looked at the fire stick in his hand, only to see then the dark green light gently rotating. Like a person who had eaten his fill, the fire stick emitted a satisfied glow, especially on the body of the stick, the originally not very obvious blood veins at this moment, as if it was full of blood, lit up, became red, with a hint of ferocity. Clang! The scary-looking fire stick slipped from Shah Danan's hand, fell on the ground, jumped twice, then stopped. After leaving Shah Danan's hand, the mysterious black stick seemed to have lost its host. All of the light immediately disappeared, turned into a normal and ugly black stick. Shah Danan took a deep breath. His mind was in turmoil. There is only one voice in his mind. What is this? What is this? At that moment, Ainin's painful cry came from afar. Shah Danan was startled. He turned around and saw Ainin was surrounded by countless of nether spirits and the pig-head Yasho. She was hit heavily and flew backward. Her clothes were dyed red. It was obvious she was heavily injured. Shah Danan shivered. He did not care about those messy things anymore. He grabbed the fire stick in his hand and flew to Ainin. In midair, the fire stick in his hand, as if carrying a trace of a smile, once again lit up a ray of dark green light, illuminating his face. Wherever Shah Danan passed, countless of nether spirits scattered away. Shah Danan caught up with Ainin in a blink. The pig-head Yasho was not afraid of the fire stick. It roared and charged at Shah Danan. Shah Danan was worried about Ainin's injury. He did not want to retreat. He also roared and used the techniques Serene taught him before he left the mountain. The fire stick left his hand, like an arrow released from the bow, charged at the pig-head Yasho. The pig-head Yasho saw the little black stick coming. It waved its front claw, wanted to push the annoying thing to the side, then rushed to eat the two annoying but delicious humans into its stomach. Unexpectedly, as soon as he waved his hand, he felt a chill in his palm. A moment later, his chest felt cold again. The pig-headed demonic beast was startled. He looked down and saw that there was a small hole in his palm. There was also a small hole in his chest. His entire body was pierced through by this seemingly unremarkable fire stick. Ayo! The pig-headed demonic beast let out a heart-wrenching roar. Its huge body swayed a little and fell heavily on the ground like a collapsing pillar, raising a cloud of dust in the air. Then it struggled on the ground. Black blood came out from its mouth, then it stopped moving. Sha Danan caught Anan. Her body was cold. She could not hold on any longer and fainted. The fire stick that killed another creature flashed with dark green light, flew back, and landed in Sha Danan's hand. Sha Danan felt full of energy. Most of his injuries were healed. He checked Anan's breathing. She was short of breath. He lowered his head and saw the wound on her left shoulder had turned black. She was poisoned. Sha Danan's heart was burning. Although the two Yasho were dead, there were still countless of nether spirits. He turned around and saw the nether spirits had gone far away into the darkness. Sha Danan was surprised, but it was a good thing that he wished for. He quickly turned around and took care of Anan. Sha Danan did not know it was all because of this sinister orb on his fire stick. 800 years ago, Elder Blackheart expanded the Falcon's Bloodforder. His name shook the world. In the underground labyrinth of Cave of Fangs, he established the foundation of Bloodforder. And Elder Blackheart was originally a savage person. Back then, when he was refining the sinister orb, he had caused the death of countless living beings, among which it was unknown how many vengeful spirits that were killed were gathered in this forsaken abyss, unable to reincarnate. They were all harmed by Sinister Orb. Now, Sinister Orb and the Nameless Stick had merged into one. The shape changed greatly. The evil energy was hidden. But once Sha Danan cast his magic, the evil energy of Sinister Orb was revealed. The nether spirits were scared and ran away. They thought the evil Elder Blackheart was reborn again. Sha Danan slowly put Anan on the ground. He hesitated for a moment, looked at the black wound, sighed. It was as if the eternal darkness had returned to peace, a deathly silence. Sha Danan felt a little dizzy, but when he saw there was no black energy on Anan's face, he was relieved. He guarded the fainted girl, sat quietly. The fire stick emitted a faint green light, covered them. The surroundings were silent. Silence. Not even the sound of insects. In Forsaken Abyss, other than nether spirits and monsters, there was no other living beings. However, at that moment, Sha Danan suddenly heard the sound of footsteps. The footsteps in the darkness were soft and harmonious. But in Sha Danan's ears, it was like thunder from the clear sky. He suddenly stood up, turned to the direction of the footsteps. At the same time, he held the fire stick tightly. In the distance, in the darkness, a speck of light moved over. Then, a woman appeared in the light. She was dressed in aqua-green clothes. Her eyebrows were thin and delicate, and her jade-like skin was whiter than snow. In the darkness, she seemed to have a bewitching beauty. It was a strange beauty that could move one's soul. Sha Danan suddenly opened his mouth wide, unable to say a word. This girl was the green dress girl he met at Shanghai Garden in Sunstream when he left the mountain. First note, Divinity and Demons, Monsters Chapter, Red-Eyed Boar Spirit. Boar head, dog body, large body, black hair, hard thorns, red eyes, able to see things in the dark. Likes to eat rotten things, likes to live in dark and moist places. Second note, Divinity and Demons, Monsters Chapter, Tree Spirit, 1,000 years old tree. Rumor says it can absorb the spirit energy of the world. Rumor says it can absorb the evil energy of the evil spirits in dark places. So it became a spirit. Tree shape, a carnivorous creature. Rumor says it can move by itself. Chapter 71. At this moment, the girl also saw Sha Danan and the unconscious Anan next to him. She also did not expect there were living people in Forsaken Abyss. Her face changed, surprised. Then, she saw Shaw Danon's face clearly. She startled, then a hint of surprise flashed across her face, then she smiled. It's really a small world. She was like a beautiful and blooming lily in the darkness, gracefully walked toward them. Shaw Danon stood up, intentionally or unintentionally blocked in front of Anan. After all, the person who came to Forsaken Abyss with nether spirits and monsters was not a normal person. When the girl got closer, Shaw Danon could see there was a small white flower between the fingers of her right hand. It was emitting a faint white light, illuminating the land around the girl. He did not know what kind of strange flower it was. But Shaw Danon had no time to care about the flower, although he was still alert to this strange girl. But no matter what, seeing her in this dark and lonely Forsaken Abyss, he felt a little more intimate. "Good morning, grandmother." Shaw Danon wanted to say some polite greetings, but the only word that came out of his mouth was this. The girl looked at him, smiled. "Isn't this Mount Jadian's Shaw Danon, young hero Zhang? Why did you come to this ghostly place? This is not a place you should come to." Shaw Danon, startled, said, "How did grandmother know I am from Jadian?" The girl smiled and did not answer. Shaw Danon frowned. He felt this girl was not simple. When he was thinking, the girl laughed lightly, said, "May I ask young hero Zhang, how long have you been here? Did you find Blood Drop Cave? Shaw Danon, startled, said, "What Blood Drop Cave?" The young girl snorted. The smile on her face gradually faded, but she still calmly said, "Young hero Zhang really knows how to play dumb. You so-called righteous people, if not for the things in the Blood Drop Cave, why would you come to this dark and dirty place?" Shaw Danon was confused by her words, but he vaguely understood there was a blood drop cave here. There must be something important in the cave. But he never heard his master or head Sherbwa mention it before he left the mountain. But he was not thinking about that. He understood the meaning of the girl's words. He said, "Grandma said we righteous are hypocritical. Then who is Grandma?" The girl flicked her green clothes, and the flower between her fingers drew an arc in the air along with her jade-like hand. The white light left an afterimage in the air, as if it missed the darkness. It lingered for a long time before it slowly dissipated. Am I not the evil cult demoness that you all deeply hate?" She smiled sweetly. Shaw Danon's heart sank. There was a feeling of loss. But the thought only flashed by, not leaving any trace. He snorted and focused on guard. Ever since he entered Qing Yun Hill, he had heard the various teachers and senior brothers teaching how the evil faction, evil people wreak havoc on the world, cruel and tyrannical, and in Qing Yun Hill's rules, it was strictly forbidden to make friends with the evil faction people. Both parties were life and death enemies, absolutely irreconcilable. But the girl did not seem to have a deep hatred, did not mean to attack immediately. Instead, her eyes peered behind Shaw Danon. She suddenly smiled. "This sister is about to wake up?" Shaw Danon turned around and saw Anan turned over slightly. Her lips moved, then slowly opened her eyes. Shaw Danon was overjoyed, turned around and said, "Grandma is awake." Unexpectedly, Lu Swecky's face suddenly revealed a shocked expression, struggled and said, "Be careful." Before Shaw Danon could react, he smelled a strange fragrance around him. White light flashed, then a white flower appeared in front of him. In the darkness, under Forsaken Abyss, how could there be a flower? Shaw Danon was surprised. He took a step back. The flower moved without wind, like it was smiling at him in midair, nodded. Suddenly, the flower split into pieces. The petals were white and lovely. The edge flashed with green light and flew toward him. Even if he did not know the Falcon identity of the girl, he knew something was wrong just by looking at the flower. Shaw Danon was suddenly attacked. He hurriedly took a few steps back and raised the fire stick in front of him. The petals touched the green light of the fire stick. Most of them were blocked, but some of them almost hurt Shaw Danon. Shaw Danon was still in shock. He cursed the Falcon heretics were really cunning. What his master, Shenyang and Shixiang, said was true. But at this moment, his eyes swept across and saw that the young girl's figure moved, and she flew towards Anan Sweki. Shaw Danon was surprised. After Anan was heavily injured, she had no strength to fight back, and the distance between them was pulled further. He quickly raised a fire stick and charged at the green dress girl. Hearing the sound of the wind, the green-clothed girl calmly smiled and raised her right hand in the air. In an instant, all the petals flew back like lightning and gathered on the flower bud. The small flower, exuding a faint white light between her fingers, met the fire stick. When the white light and the dark green light of the fire stick came into contact, the two were in a stalemate for a moment. It seemed like there was no winner and the loser, so they both flew back. In the darkness, a surprised exclamation suddenly rang out. Shah Danon caught the fire stick and quickly returned to Anan. He stood in front of her, did not let this cunning falcon heretic do her trick again. But the strange and treacherous heretic suddenly stopped. She let Shah Danon return to Anan. She looked at Shah Danon with surprise in her eyes. During the fight, she thought the Heartsword flower in her hand could easily stop Shah Danon. But when Heartsword and the fire stick were in midair, the strange fragrance that could penetrate people's heart and paralyze them was pushed back. There was also a slight backfire. She was surprised. Shah Danon stood in front of Anan and helped her to stand up. He asked quietly, "Are you all right, Lucia G?" Anan shook her head. Shah Danon was relieved. He turned his head and said hatefully, "Shameless heretic, only know how to sneak attack." The surprise in the girl's eyes immediately disappeared, replaced by anger. She snorted, said, "Okay, later I will let you see the power of heretic." She was about to make her move. Shah Danon quickly prepared, but his heart was complaining. Anan was leaning on him, weak and powerless. She was obviously heavily injured. Most likely the poison was still in her body. And this falcon heretic was unpredictable. If she attacked, it would be hard to take care of Lucia G. Unfortunately, things in the world are not always as one wishes. While Shah Danon was thinking, he suddenly found things were getting worse. In the darkness, another light appeared. This light was different from the green dress girl's. Although it was light, it was dark. In the darkness, it almost made people think it was black light. In the light, a faint silhouette walked out and stopped next to the green-clothed girl. This was a tall and slender girl, dressed in black, with a veil covering her face. It was the companion who had traveled with the girl in Shanghai Garden that day. Then, under Shah Danon's surprised eyes, beams of light appeared in the darkness. 5 people appeared, dressed in yellow. They were the followers of the girl in Shanghai Yuan. They were all here. Shah Danon felt his throat was dry. Under the gaze of so many people, he could not help but feel cold. At that moment, he suddenly heard Anan's weak voice. "Go quickly. Their cultivation is not below you and me. You cannot fight them." Shah Danon turned his head and saw the pale but beautiful face was next to him. There was no fear or worry on her face. It was like she was talking about something normal. Shah Danon startled, then shook his head. He tightened his lips and turned his head again, facing the mysterious falcon people. "Bailu, be careful." The masked woman looked at the 2 people. Her eyes landed on the fire stick in Shah Danon's hand. She said quietly, "That black stick is a bit strange." "Bailu," the green dress girl said, "Aunt Nigar, what did grandmother see?" She couldn't see the expression of the masked woman who was called Aunt Yu, but from her words, she could hear a trace of confusion. It seems to be Lao Ai's ferocious aura just now. It's too similar. But how could the people of the right path have this thing? They don't know how to control this bead. And this is a short stick. What's going on? Chapter 72. Bailu snorted, said, "I would like to see how powerful this thing is." Then she took a step forward. The men in yellow behind her also walked forward. Shah Danon knew something was wrong. Although he wanted to fight, the difference between them was too big. He had to hold Anan and step back. The masked woman in black looked very ghostly. She floated straight forward in the darkness, followed next to Bailu like a nether spirit. She said with a voice that only they could hear, "The short stick in that young man's hand is very vicious. Can you feel it?" Bailu looked at the nervous Shah Danon and nodded. The masked woman paused for a moment and said, "Even so, I feel that the ferocious power of this short stick has not been fully released. It seems to be suppressed by something. In my opinion, this short stick is most likely related to our holy church. This young man's identity is very suspicious. Grandmother, you must think twice before acting. Bailu frowned, said, Aunt Nigar, Nana, what should we do? The masked woman's voice turned calm, said, just capture him and bring him back for Nana Father to see. Faction head is as wise as the heaven and earth. He must know about this thing. Bailu thought for a moment, said, all right. As they spoke, they did not stop and continued to press forward. Without their approval, the yellow-robed man beside them naturally would not make a move. As they spoke, one advanced and one retreated. They had already walked quite a distance. Shah Danon held Anan. He was getting more and more nervous. He could hear the sound of water. It seemed they had returned to the bay where they came from. Bailu, startled, turned to the masked woman. Aunt Nigar, is this the Heartless Sea ? The masked woman was silent for a moment, then sighed quietly. Infatuation is only because of heartless pain. That's right, this is the most mysterious heartless sea in the 5 seas. Because of her young age, Bailu did not notice the bitterness in the masked woman's words. She was very excited, said, I heard from my father when I was young that the Heartless Sea is hidden deep under the ground. It is the 9 Nether Sea. He said the Blooddrop Cave under Forsaken Abyss is at this Heartless Sea. It seems we have been searching for 3 days, finally found it. The masked woman fell into silence and did not utter a single word. Bai Yao felt strange. She looked at Bai Yao, then did not take it to heart. She turned her head and said, okay, I will capture you first, then I will find that Blooddrop Cave. As she spoke, she waved her hand, and the 5 yellow-robed men stepped forward, ready to attack. Behind Shah Danon was the endless heartless sea in the darkness, and in front of him was surrounded by the Falcon. There was no way forward, no way back. He was in a dead end. Lu Sweki felt a gust of cold wind blowing from the heartless sea behind her, chilling in her heart, and her body was sore and powerless, and even faintly felt dizzy and nauseous. Most likely it was because of the lingering poison. How smart she was, without thinking. She knew that if Shah Danon wanted to take care of her, both of them would die together. She turned her head and looked at Shah Danon. This young man seemed to be nervous. His body was tense. Even the hand that was holding her was forceful. Even in his eyes, there was the desire for life and the fear of death. However, he clearly did not retreat at all. Zhang Shidi, she called softly. Shah Danon heard it. His shoulder moved a little, seemed like he was about to turn his head. But for some reason, he did not turn his head to look at her. Senior apprentice Sister Lu, on the platform, even grandmother saved me just now. I won't leave without you. Shah Danon was excited. He was about to say something heroic, but when the words reached his mouth, they seemed to be lost. Finally, he could only say the word, not leave. Lu Sweki did not say anything. Shah Danon suddenly felt uneasy. Did he offended her with his words? For some reason, since he first met Lu Sweki, he was afraid of this cold girl. The cold wind blew from the heartless sea, blew a few strands of the silent girl's long hair, lightly brushed past his neck and face. The waves of the heartless sea seemed to suddenly surge. Deep in the darkness, like a sigh, the wind brushed past, like the heartless sea showed a ferocious smile, mocking at the people of the world. Bailu smiled, led the 5 yellow-clothes men to surround him. Shah Danon took a step back. His feet felt cold. He stepped into the bone-chilling sea water. At this moment, on the gradually turbulent heartless sea, suddenly a huge wave rose up high. The sound of the waves was deafening. It looked to be a few zhongs high. The strong wind blew. The people on the shore all had a change of expression, almost could not stand steadily. The masked woman who stood at the back suddenly changed, quickly shouted, Bailu, quickly retreat. Bailu was surprised. She knew Aunt Nigar was very knowledgeable. Even her father always respected her. She did not think too much and retreated. She moved. The 5 yellow-clothes men also retreated. Only Shah Danon and Lu Sweki, who stood closest to the shore, were caught off guard. They were hit by the giant wave. Their bodies were soaked, and the bone-chilling coldness was very uncomfortable. Then, everyone looked towards the heartless sea that had suddenly undergone a huge change. On the dark sea, Two giant lamps that were flashing with green light slowly lit up. But looking at it, the lights were really strange. They were not in a normal circle, but in a slender shape from top to bottom. Especially in the middle, there were two dark slits, revealing a cold and fierce aura. It's it. The masked woman's body shook. This beast is not dead yet. Bailu was surprised. Beast? Aunt Nigar, what is that? The masked woman looked at the two circles of light that were getting closer to the shore. There was fear in her voice. She said, "This is Abyssal Viper." Bailu was shocked, almost could not believe it. She asked, "Didn't this demon was killed by the mythical beast Yellowbird at the western swamp thousands of years ago?" The masked woman quickly said, "That is the rumor, but today it actually appeared here." "I also don't know Bailu. This Abyssal Viper is an ancient demon, extremely ferocious. Only its natural enemy Yellowbird can kill it. Let's retreat." Bailu took 2 steps back, then suddenly turned her head, said, "But that brat." The masked woman shook her head, said, "We can't care about that. Let's go." Bailu was still hesitating, but Shah Danon and Anan, who were soaked by the waves, almost held their breath in a blink of an eye. As they got closer, the two of them could clearly see that the 2 lamps, which were almost as tall as 2 people, were actually a pair of giant eyes. Since they entered the Cave of Fangs, Shah Danon had seen many strange and giant eyes, from Yen Boss's red devil eye to the pig's giant eyes. But no matter which one compared to this pair of eyes, they were like mustard seed compared to Mount Meru. The sea wind blew against their face, but it did not bring a salty taste, but an overwhelming fishy smell, choking their nose. An incomparably huge black snake slowly appeared in front of them. Its lower body was coiled up, its snake body soaked in the seawater. The crowd was not even 3 times as thick as that huge snake body. But the black water, mystical viper's upper body and head that were standing upright in the air were already more than 100 feet above the ground. Its snake eyes were emitting faint green light. Right now, it was looking down from above, looking at these people who were like ants to it. Note 1. Shah Danon never knew there was such a giant creature in this world. He even thought the master spirit water Kirin on Mount Jadian Peak of Widows was the largest spirit beast in the world. But compared to the Abyssal Viper, the water Kirin size was no different than a puppy. Not to mention him, even Lu Sweki and even Felkin's Bailu and others had never seen such a giant beast before. They were stunned, unable to make a sound. Note 1. Classic of mountains and seas, southern classic of wastelands. South of Blackwater, there is Black Serpent, eat venomous centipede. There is Mount Wu, west there is Yellowbird. Emperor's Medicine, 8 temples. Yellowbird at Mount Wu, guard this Black Serpent. Note 2. God and Devil. Strange, monster chapter, Abyssal Viper, giant snake, black body, white belly, green eyes, snake body 4 yards thick, 1,000 yards long. Cannot die after eating divine medicine. Live over 10,000 years. Live in Western Swamp. Also said live in the sea. Chapter 73. The waves of heartless sea calmed down, but the fear in everyone's heart did not decrease at all. The huge body of the black water, mystical serpent coiled in front of him, standing there like a demon from the ancient times. The giant snake's head slightly swayed. It seemed like it did not expect to encounter the breath of living people in forsaken abyss. It looked at them for a few more times, but did not do anything. Anan was a calm person. She reacted first. She turned and saw Shah Danon was still staring at Abyssal Viper. She lightly pulled his sleeve. Shah Danon's body shook. He turned his head. Anan said lightly, "Let's back off." Shah Danon immediately realized, nodded, held Anan and backed off. The masked lady beside Bayao at the back saw it from the corner of her eyes, said, "Don't touch it." Shah Danon and Anan startled. But in a blink, the green light in Abyssal Viper's giant eyes burst out. Like it was startled by something, it let out a heaven-shaking roar. Everyone covered their ears, but they could still hear the ringing in their ears. While Shah Danon was still in shock, Abyssal Viper's body moved. The giant snake tail that was soaked in the water swept across, instantly raised up a water wall several feet tall, several hundred feet wide, covering the sky and covering the earth. Within the water, the black snake tail was mixed with it, charging forward with endless strength. The splashes of water were still several zhang away, but the strong wind had already hit them, causing them to be unable to stand still. If they were really hit by this tsunami-like wall of water and touched the huge snake tail, they would most likely be smashed into pieces. Shah Danon could not care so much. He held Anan with his right hand, summoned the fire stick, and flew backward with all his strength. But the water wall was like the wind, faster than any movement. Before Shah Danon could fly 1 feet, he was already caught by the water wall. The sound of water was like thunder, almost right next to their ears. Shah Danon's body tightened. There was no thought in his mind. At the moment of life and death, Shah Danon shouted and flew upward with all his strength. But when he was only 1 feet above the ground, Shah Danon felt his body was cold. Boom! He was involuntarily drawn into the huge wave. In a blink of an eye, his entire body was drenched. He heard Anan beside him crying out. His hands loosened. Under this unstoppable force, he and Anan were actually separated. Shah Danon was shocked. He was about to pull Anan, but the giant wave was so powerful that they were already several yards away from each other in an instant. Anan, who was just beside him, disappeared into the raging darkness. Shah Danon's body trembled. His mind was in chaos. He was pushed by the huge wave, rolling forward in the wave. At this moment, Shah Danon felt his body was about to be split open by the enormous force. He suddenly saw, in the wave, a black shadow flashed. Abyssal Viper's enormous black tail was charging at him like a mountain. Wherever the black tail passed, the water splashed. Sand and stones flew everywhere. Shah Danon did not believe he could survive after being hit by the giant tail. At this moment of life and death, Shah Danon gathered his remaining courage. Energy came out from his body. In the wave, the green light rose again. Shah Danon attached himself to it and ran for his life. He rose to the sky and managed to reach more than 10 feet in the giant wave. Just as he was rejoicing in his heart, he suddenly felt an enormous and unstoppable force sweep past his body, causing his entire body to tremble. Even though he was only swept by the residual force, his vision went black and he almost fainted. If it wasn't for the fact that he knew that this was a life and death situation and forcefully held on to maintain his consciousness, he would really have lost his life here. Even so, the power of Abyssal Viper's tail was so powerful. Shah Danon's body shook. His bones felt like they were about to break. In the giant wave, he did not have any strength left and was knocked far away by the giant force. In the air, his body was involuntarily flying into the endless darkness in front of him. As he flipped over, he looked down, only to see the mountain-like wave, and the huge snake tail had swallowed Bailu and the others in a blink of an eye. The yellow-clothed men scattered, but they were all knocked down by the giant wave. The green-clothed woman leaped up and made a gesture with both hands. A white light flashed, and the white flower in her hand appeared in front of her. In a moment, it transformed into 6 strange flowers that surrounded the flower in the middle. Each flower had a pure white light that connected with it, and it looked like a white wheel of light. Bailu's face was pale, but she did not seem to panic. As soon as the white light wheel formed, it spun quickly. The dazzling white light faced the huge wave and actually blocked it. In midair for a moment, the huge wave piled up like a mountain. The rumbling sound was almost terrifying. Taking advantage of this moment, to catch her breath, Bailu flew up. But at this moment, the noise in the huge wave suddenly became louder, rumbling. That huge black snake tail actually swept across at this moment. In a moment, the white wheel of light was annihilated. It could not stop it for even a minute. Seeing the beautiful girl was about to be hit by the giant tail, the masked woman suddenly appeared in the wave. The soft pale yellow round object in her hand flashed in the air and came like lightning. It caught Bailu's body in front of the giant tail. Bailu barely dodged this life-threatening object, but she was still hit by the remaining force. Her body felt light and floated far away into the darkness behind her. and at the next moment, the masked woman's figure was submerged in the giant wave again. The power of the obsidian viper's tail sweep was unimaginably powerful. Shah Danon was in midair, but he could hear the wind whistling in his ears. His whole body kept flying backward. If he suddenly hit into something, such as a hard rock, all the bones in his body will break. But knowing is knowing, Shah Danon had no power to control his body. His body was out of his control. He could only leave it to fate. But this forsaken abyss was extraordinarily large. After flying for a while, he still did not hit anything. Even Shah Danon could feel his speed was slowing down, and he was slowly falling. It seemed the remaining force was getting weaker, although it will not feel good if he landed on the ground, but it was much better than hitting the wall. Shah Danon was feeling happy. Suddenly, the darkness in front of him suddenly solidified like a mountain, pressing on his head. Like a mountain in front of him. Shah Danon hugged his head and shrunk his body, then hit it hard. Bang! Rocks flew, stars danced. Shah Danon's body shook. Then he spat out a mouthful of blood on his clothes. At that moment, he felt his body was scattered. If not for the Taoist and Buddhist incantation protecting his body, he would have lost his life. Even so, he didn't feel good. His whole body stopped on the precipice for a moment, then slid down powerlessly. As his body slid down, he hit the hard stone wall several times. With a pong-pong sound, his whole body was in pain. He didn't know how many bones were broken. In any case, he only felt that there wasn't a single part of his body that was intact. After falling for a while, after another hit, Shah Danon was flipped out. He almost gave up hope. But as he flipped, with the weak light from the fire stick in front of his chest, he could vaguely see a black shadow, like an old tree, growing on the precipice. At this critical moment, he did not expect there would be a tree growing on the hard stone wall of forsaken abyss. He instinctively reached out his hand and grabbed the old tree. The sound of the wind was urgent, and his falling speed was even faster. But in the end, in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, he caught the old tree. When he touched it, it really did not have the coldness of the cliff. Instead, it felt warm. But the force of the fall was too great. The old tree's root was not stable. Although Shah Danon held the tree trunk, the tree shook violently, dirt and stones fell off. After a few shakes, the tree and the person fell down together with it. At the moment of falling, Shah Danon felt his heart sank. His heart was like falling into a bottomless abyss. His body was still falling, but because of this, his speed was still slower. After a loud thud, he fell heavily on the ground and fainted. After a long time, Shah Danon slowly woke up. Before he opened his eyes, he felt pain all over his body, like his bones were falling apart. But with the pain, it seemed he was still alive. His heart was not all sad. He opened his eyes and couldn't help but be stunned by what he saw. At this moment, he was in a closed and damp place. It seemed to be a cave. The top of the cave was as high as 2 people, but the 2 sides were only 3 feet wide. Very narrow. The sides of the cave were cold and hard stones. It looked the same as the one on the precipice. If it is not inside the precipice, then it must be near the precipice. But the stones in the cave seemed to contain some glowing things. They were not big, but there were a lot of them. Each of them emitted a soft light, brightened up the cave. Shah Danon carefully looked at the situation in the cave. It seemed to be a passage. One end was a pile of rocks, blocking the path. The other end extended inward, but not far away. It turned into a corner, unable to see clearly the situation inside. He startled on the ground, then wanted to get up. But when his body moved, his left hand supported on the ground. Suddenly his whole body was in pain. He cried out. His body trembled, especially his left hand was in extreme pain. Oomph. A cold snort suddenly came from the deep of the cave. Shah Danon was surprised. He turned around and saw a woman turn around the corner. She was in water-green dress, beautiful and beautiful. If it is not the Falcon Demoness, who else could it be? They were facing each other just now. When Shah Danon saw the falcon, he instinctively lifted up the fire stick and focused on defense. He even forgot the pain in his body. But that girl called Bailu glared at him. She did not have any intention to fight. Her expression was strange and lost. like she could not lift up her energy. She impatiently said, all right, look at your silly look. Your bones are broken at 7 or 8 places, but you still have such spirit. Shah Danon frowned, but Bila did not seem to have any intention to fight. Although it was strange, he still slowly put down the fire stick. But when he put down the stick, the pain came again. He couldn't help but cried out. Chapter 74. Bila looked at the strange, grimacing face of this righteous young man. She couldn't help but laughed out. The atmosphere was eased, but after the laughter, she let out a long sigh, a bit sad. Shah Danon snorted. He was a stubborn person. Being laughed at by this young woman, he felt embarrassed. He said angrily, what are you laughing at? Bila glanced at him, said, I am laughing at you. Shah Danon heard she was so direct and did not give him any face. His anger rose, said angrily, what is so funny? Why don't your nipples get it? Bila's face changed. She looked like she was going to teach this arrogant kid a lesson. But as she moved her hand, she suddenly felt dull, sighed. We are all going to die soon. Why should I fight with you? Shah Danon was about to defend, but then he heard what the woman said. He was startled, asked, what did Nipples say? Bila glanced at him, said, this is a cave. Can't you see? Shah Danon said, yes. So what? Bila snorted, pointed at the rocks in front of them, said, that is the only exit. Now it is blocked by the rocks like a mountain. If you have the ability, just break the mountain and get out. Shah Danon opened his mouth wide. He looked at the rocks. The entrance was blocked by the huge rocks. There was no gap. He knew his own ability. If it is against enemies, his fire stick and cultivation are still useful. But if it is used to dig the ground like a foolish old man, it is really useless. After a while, he suddenly thought of an important thing. He quickly turned around, said, I remember I hit the cliff and fell to the ground. How'd I end up in this cave? Bai Yao said lightly, I dragged you in. What? Shah Danon was speechless. Bila glanced at him and said, I landed not far from where you fainted and happened to see you. At that moment, that Blackwater mystical viper was chasing us again. I looked up and saw that the old tree you pulled down was actually a cave. There was light coming out from inside, and the cave entrance was not big, so I hid in it. Before I left, I felt sorry for you, so I dragged you in as well, fool. Shah Danon frowned, said, then why is the entrance buried? Bai Yao shrugged, with a face of misfortune, said, the Blackwater mystical viper couldn't get in, so it swung its tail and hit the precipice. Half of the mountain collapsed, buried this place, all of us. Shah Danon looked at her for a while, said doubtfully, really? Bai Yao's face was filled with anger. She grabbed a palm-sized rock and threw it over. I lied to you? If I had known earlier, I would have let you die. Shah Danon could not dodge. He could only use his hand to protect his head. Unexpectedly, the stone hit his left hand. The pain went deep into his heart. His vision darkened and almost fainted again. Bila saw Shah Danon's face suddenly turn pale. He held his left hand that was hit by the stone and showed a painful expression. Her heart jumped, then said coldly, don't play dead. Haha, I have seen a lot of people like you. Shah Danon did not have the strength to care about what she said about play dead. He felt he was about to die from the pain. His entire hand was numb from the pain. Bila looked at him for a while, saw he did not seem to be pretending. She walked to Shah Danon, glanced at him, ignored Shah Danon's expression, and pinched Shah Danon's arm a few times. Shah Danon was sweating from the pain, said angrily, what are you doing, grandmother? Bila was not angry. Instead, there was a trace of apology on her face, said, your arm bone is broken. Shah Danon snorted, but he was stubborn, said directly, it was broken by the abyssal viper. It has nothing to do with grandmother. Grandmother, go away. Bila took a glance at him, snorted, and really did not say anything. She walked away and stood at the side, watching coldly, like she was going to watch a good show. Shah Danon was in extreme pain, but he could not lose face in front of this heretic no matter what. He forced himself to stand up and examine himself. There were many scratches on his body, but most of them were external wounds. Only his left hand was broken. That was a great fortune in misfortune. But even so, the pain of broken bone was not easy to bear. He moved a few times and affected the wound. Cold sweat came out again. Shah Danon gritted his teeth, using the healing technique he learned from Mount Jadian's bamboo peak. He wanted to fix his arm. But all he could find were strange rocks. There was no straight way to fix his arm. He couldn't help but worry. Bailu stood at the side, suddenly said, "That stick of yours." Shah Danon startled, then realized. The fire stick was 1 foot long. It was perfect for him to use. He looked at the girl and wanted to say thank her, but she was looking down on him. He swallowed back the words, forced himself to say, "I already thought of it. Grandmother can say more." Bailu curled her lips, said, "Then what are you looking for?" Shah Danon said angrily, "Can't I just look for the way out? If I don't find the way out, will I be trapped here for the rest of my life?" Speaking till here, he suddenly thought of something. His body shook. He turned to Bai Yao and said, "Oh right, Grandmother, did you see my senior sister from the same sect?" Bailu looked at his anxious look, startled for a moment, then shook her head, said, "At that time, everyone's life was at stake. Who will pay attention to others?" Shah Danon was silent. He was really worried. Anan was still poisoned. Now she was in danger. Her life was in danger. Thinking of that, he let out a long sigh and lowered his head. Bailu's face softened. Watching the young man fix his wounded arm on the ugly fire stick, she couldn't help but ask, "Are you and your Shiji good?" Shah Danon, startled, shook his head, "No, but she is my after all. Why should I tell Grandmother?" Shah Danon suddenly woke up and ignored her. He tore off his clothes, tied his right hand with the sun, and fixed his left hand. Then he looked at the pile of rocks at the door, sighed, turned, and walked into the cave. Watching Shah Danon walk into the cave, Bailu couldn't help but ask, "Where are you going?" Shah Danon said while walking, "I am buried alive here. I need to see what is the situation inside." Bailu snorted, but for some reason, in this lifeless cave, she still followed him. It was like when two people were together, there was no panic. After turning the corner, what appeared in front of Shah Danon was a corridor similar to where he was just now, but it was a bit wider. The stone walls on both sides were still glowing, brightening up the place. But the dust under his feet was very thick. There were obvious footprints when he stepped on it. There was a footprint in the middle of the path. It seemed like it was left by Bailu when she came in to investigate. After a while, the corridor came to an end, but there was another turn in front of him. At the same time, there was a faint sound of water. Bailu, who was walking behind him, suddenly called, "Shah Danon." "What?" Shah Danon answered subconsciously, but immediately turned back, said, "How did Grandmother know my name?" Bailu giggled, said, "You told me in Heyong City." Shah Danon remembered and felt very embarrassed. He turned his head and walked forward, at the same time said, "Why is there sound of water in front?" Bailu said grumpily, "That is at the end of the tunnel. There is a small curtain of water dripping down. There is no other way out." I can't believe I will die in this place." Shah Danon ignored her and walked forward. After a while, the sound of water became louder, splash, splash. Not long after, he saw at the end of the tunnel, a curtain of water fell from the top of the cave. The water splashed, crystal clear and beautiful, and finally fell into a small pond at the end of the tunnel. If it was not in this dangerous place, it could be considered as a scenery. But at this moment, no matter who it is, no one will have the good mood to enjoy this scenery. Shah Danon walked to the front of the waterfall and carefully examined it. His heart was chilled. Behind the waterfall was a hard stone wall, no different than the stone on both sides of the tunnel. The small pond was clear enough to see the bottom, but there was no water coming out from it. Such a small place probably seeped into the ground. And above, the place where the water was dripping was at the top of the stone wall. It was filled with water, dripping down nonstop. Where's the exit? Shah Danon turned back and met Bailu's eyes. They looked at each other, then became silent. For a moment, the cave fell into a deathly silence. Shah Danon's heart was in a mess. Seeing he was in a hopeless situation, he was worried about Anan, who was missing. Not only his heart was in a mess, the wound on his left hand was not treated properly. The pain came again. It was very uncomfortable. Bailu looked at him. Her heart could not bear it. She said quietly, "Sit down and rest for a while. We will slowly think of a way to get out." In this dangerous place, Shah Danan's enmity towards her seemed to have faded. If it was in the outside world, he and this Falcon heretic would be enemies. But at this moment, both of them were about to die here. How could he care about the difference between factions? Shah Danan quietly sat down, looked around startled, then looked at the stone wall above the dripping water. He thought, "Can't believe the first time I leave the mountain, I already got so many setbacks. Now I am in a dangerous place. If Master knows about this, he will probably scold me for being an unfilial disciple. If Ling'er Shiji knows about this, I wonder what she will do." Bailu saw Shah Danan's expression was a little strange. She couldn't help but ask, "What are you thinking about?" Shah Danan woke up. His face blushed, but how could he tell the truth? His eyes glanced around, then changed the topic. "There are many strange things in Forsaken Abyss. And see, there are a few red spots on the stone wall. The water droplets flowed through. They were reflected red like blood." Bailu suddenly jumped up. Her eyes widened. Her face was nervous. She said urgently, "What did you say?" Chapter 75. Shah Danan did not expect Bailu would have such a big reaction. He was surprised by her, pointed at the top of the cave, said, "There are several red stones there." Bailu immediately walked closer, looked at the top of the cave carefully. Through the water droplets, there were 7 red stones of half a palm size set on the top of the cave. The stone texture was the same as the stones next to it. Only the color was different. Shah Danan saw Bailu was nervous, focusing on the top of the cave. He was curious. He stood up and looked at the top of the cave. The 7 red stones were crooked on the top of the cave. It looked like a strange spoon shape, especially that color. It was unknown how many years it had been washed by the water in this cave, but it was still as red as blood. Even when the sparkling and translucent water droplets flowed past these red stones, they were dyed a blood-like red. Then they dripped down like drops of blood from the top of the cave. But once the water droplets were far away from the red stones, they returned to their original transparent appearance. While he was watching, he suddenly heard Bailu murmured, "Blood drop cave, blood drop cave, blood drop." "Huh!" Bailu suddenly beamed with joy. She slapped Shah Danan with her right hand. Shah Danan's face turned pale. That slap was not light. Shah Danan was angry. When he was about to ask, he saw the girl smiled sweetly, did not mind it at all. She said excitedly, "You evil old devil, you built Blood Drop Cave at this place. No wonder we could not find it for 800 years. Shah Danan was surprised, but then he remembered Bailu had asked him about Blood Drop Cave. He immediately understood, snorted, "Evil." Bailu's mood was very good. She was not angry, she smiled. "I am evil. So what? I still need to thank you for helping me find this place." Shah Danan was even more unwilling, especially when he saw Bailu's beautiful smile. An unknown fire rose in his heart. He felt he had unintentionally helped the Falcon heretic. If his masters and elders knew about it, they will punish him. But just as he thought up to this point, he immediately remembered that he couldn't even go out now. So how could he think about the future? He immediately became discouraged and silently sat down. Bailu was very happy. She did not mind Shah Danan's strange expression. The evil sect had a very long history. There were many factions in the sect, and there were many of them, rising and falling from time to time. 800 years ago, the Bloodforger Hall that Elder Blackheart was in was known as the #1 faction of the evil sect at that time. Their strength was strong, and their experts were as many as the clouds. Elder Blackheart himself was even the ancestor of the cultivation world. But as time passed, and after a few battles with the good faction, Bloodforger Hall gradually declined and was replaced by other factions. In today's world, the evil faction was led by 4 big sects, which were Hehuan's sect, Wandu clan, Changshin Hall, Ghost King sect. But in terms of power and influence, none of them could be compared to the Bloodforger Hall, which was flourishing in the past. In the evil sect, for 800 years, there was a legend that after the war between good and evil, although the main leaders of Bloodforger Hall were all killed, most of their espers were hidden in the base of Bloodforger Hall, Cave of Fangs, a secret place called Blood Drop Cave. For these 800 years, countless of Falcons secretly stole in a Cave of Fangs. Even Forsaken Abyss was searched everywhere, but they all returned empty-handed. Although Bailu was young, but she was already an important person in Vim, one of the four big factions. This time she came to Forsaken Abyss, such a dangerous place. It was because she was entrusted by the Vim's master. Now, the thing that countless of elders could not do for 800 years, the place that could not be found, was right in front of her. How could she not be happy? For a moment, she completely forgot that she was in a dangerous place. Bila was happy. She stared at the top of the cave, then rose up and carefully touched the red stones. Her hand felt cold, but it was no different than the stones beside it. She lightly knocked the red stones, but there was no reaction. Beside the excitement, there was a bit of nervousness in her face. She then pulled, knocked, lifted, smashed, and pulled. She used all kinds of methods and touched every red stone, but everything was normal. Nothing unusual happened. Shah Danan watched from below. His heart was happy. He couldn't help but laugh. I think this is not Blooddrop Cave. You guessed it wrong. Bailu helplessly landed on the ground. She glared at Shah Danan, but there was no doubt in her heart. Did she really guess it wrong? For the next 4 hours, Shah Danan sat on the ground, watching Bailu, the girl in water-green dress, frowning, pacing back and forth, thinking hard. Sometimes she rose up and thought of a new method to deal with the red stones, but it was all in vain. While watching, Shah Danan suddenly felt his stomach was growling. He was hungry. He put his hand into his chest, wanted to take out some food he brought with him, but it was empty. He must have lost it when he fell into the water. He cried bitterly. His stomach was hungry, and there was nothing to eat in the cave. The water in front of him was very clear, but there was not even a fish or shrimp. The hunger in his stomach was getting heavier and heavier, more and more uncomfortable. Shah Danan could not do anything but drink the water, but it was useless. He sighed sadly. It seemed like he was going to starve to death in here. At this moment, Bila did not feel hungry at all. All her thoughts were on the 7 red stones. But after a long time, she still got nothing. She sat down, but her eyes were still staring at the red stones, lost in thought. Shah Danan looked at her, couldn't help but remind her, "What's the use of looking at that? If we don't think of a way to get out, we will starve to death here first." Bailu's body moved. Then she remembered there was a disciple of Righteous next to her. She turned her head and looked at him, suddenly said, "Are you hungry?" How could Shah Danan lose his face in front of her? He immediately raised his head, said no. Goo 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 goo. His stomach seemed to be against him. After he finished, it growled twice. Bila couldn't help but laughed out. Shah Danan's face turned red. He wished there was a hole in the ground to hide in. Bila laughed, took out a portion of food, and gave it to Shah Danan, said seriously, "I think you better help me think of a way to open the Blooddrop Cave." Shah Danan snorted, turned his head, did not look at the food, said firmly, "You think a portion of food can buy me? Don't even think about it." Bailu, startled, rolled her eyes, then smiled. "You are wrong. I mean, we are in a hopeless situation. If there is no way out, we can only die here. But there's a Blooddrop Cave in front of us. If we can find out the location of the cave, there may be another way out." Shah Danan thought about it. It was reasonable. To survive, finding this Blooddrop Cave is a way out, or else they can only wait for death. But he was stubborn. He ignored the food Bai Yao gave him. He stood up and looked at the red rocks again. Bai Yao was not angry. She just looked at his figure, smiled, stood up, and looked at the top of the cave. The 7 red stones were arranged like spoons on the top of the cave. Aside from the dark red color, they were no different than the surrounding stones. Shah Danan looked at them for a while, but found nothing. He wanted to go up and knock them one by one, but when he remembered Bailu had tried all kinds of methods, he gave up. The 2 people raised their head to observe it first. Then they got tired and sat on the ground. Then Shah Danan did not care about any etiquette. A dying person should be like that. He lied on the ground and looked at the top of the cave. After a long time, he still did not find anything. Then he fell into a deep sleep. After a long time, Shah Danan woke up. When he opened his eyes, he saw Bailu was still staring at the 7 red stones with her bright eyes. Shah Danan had a bit of admiration for this woman. He sat up, but when he just moved, his stomach growled again. It seemed like he was very hungry and did not give face to the master. There was no other sound in the cave except the sound of water dripping. The growling sound came into Bila's ears. She turned her head and looked at him. Shah Danon was too ashamed to show his face. He could die, but he could not lose his face. He immediately turned his head to the other side and did not look at Bailu, but his face was still hot. He laughed awkwardly, then walked to the pond and wanted to drink some water to quench his thirst. The water in the pond was most likely the spring from underground. Besides the coldness, it was also clear and refreshing and also a little sweet. But after Shah Danon drank 2 mouthfuls, the hunger in his stomach became stronger. After all, water cannot be eaten. Shah Danon sighed, stared at the water blankly. The water droplets fell from the top of the cave, hit the water, created layers of ripples, and floated out. Under the surface of the water, his somewhat haggard face was reflected, and it was slightly flushed. Chapter 76. Slightly red? Shah Danon suddenly realized why there was red color on his reflection in the water. He quickly looked at his reflection in the water and found there were several red spots on his face. But then he realized something was wrong. He looked at the wall again. It was because the red stones on the wall were reflected in the water and overlapped with his reflection. That was why there was this situation. Shah Danon breathed a sigh of relief. But at that moment, his heart moved. He took a step back and stared at the water. The reflection of the 7 red stones appeared in the water. Because they were reflections, their arrangement was no longer in the strange shape of a spoon. Instead, it looked like a person's palm. Shah Danon stood there, did not say anything. At that moment, he suddenly hesitated, like he was standing at a crossroad, did not know where to go. The feeling flashed by. He turned around, turned his head. Hey. Bailu was still looking at the wall, said carelessly, "My name is not Hey. That is what you told me when we first met." Shah Danon was stunned. The words that were about to come out of his mouth were almost poured back. But for some reason, he had unusual patience when facing this girl who seemed a little frivolous. He said, "Then what is your name?" Bailu turned around, smiled. "I am Bailu." Shah Danon muttered in his heart, then shook his head. "Come here and have a look." Bailu was a little surprised. She stood up and walked to him, said, "What?" Shah Danon pointed at the water. Bailu bent down and looked at it. The water was rippling, but after she focused, she could see the reflection of the 7 red stones in the water. Bailu's body shook. She quickly turned around, said, "This is—" Shah Danon shook his head, said, "I just accidentally saw it. Maybe it is not." Before he finished, Bailu already cut him off. "No matter what, we have to try." Then she did not waste any more words and jumped into the water. Shah Danon was surprised. In just a moment, the water droplets had wetted Bailu's clothes, but she did not care, just held her breath and waited. Because she stepped into the water, the scattered water gradually calmed down. Bailu quietly waited for the reflection of the 7 red stones to reappear in the water. Shah Danon watched from ashore. The pearl-like water droplets gently fell from the air, landed on the beautiful lady's hair, shoulder, face, clothes. Clear and transparent water droplets slid down from the tips of her black hair and slowly flowed over her snow-white skin. It was as if even her face was so beautiful that it was almost transparent. Shah Danon was mesmerized. The sound of water in the cave suddenly faded away. In his eyes, there was only the beautiful girl standing in the water, like a lotus flower coming out from the water. Her breathtaking beauty came to his face. The reflections of the 7 red stones slowly appeared, like a palm quietly floating in the water. Bai Yao looked at the position, slowly stretched out her right hand, and pressed down on the position of that palm. Her jade-like hand passed through the gentle water ripples and reached downwards. The reflection of the red stone in the water faintly floated up. The surface of the water sparkled and reflected light from an unknown place, illuminating the beautiful woman's face. The pool was very shallow. Bailu's hand quickly touched the bottom of the pool. There was a thin layer of sand and stones at the bottom of the pool. When her hand touched, Bailu could feel there were 5 slightly protruding places under her hand, right at the tip of her fingers. She was happy. She brushed her hand. Under the sand and stones, there were 5 small stones embedded in the ground, glowing with red light. Bailu did not think much, pressed down with her 5 fingers, then raised her head. There was no movement at all. The joy on Bailu's face froze. Her eyes met with Shah Danon on the shore for a moment, then turned back. Shah Danon was about to say some comforting words to her, but Bailu suddenly remembered something. She looked at the water, carefully searched around the reflection of the other 2 red stones. She found another 2 small stones. This time, she seemed more nervous. She carefully pressed her left hand, then, at the same time, pressed down the 7 small stones. There was a moment when Shah Danon and Bailu thought they failed again. The cave was quiet, except for the sound of water. There was no other sound. However, after they waited for a long moment, a sharp but heavy crack sound rang in the cave. Bailu and Shah Danon looked at the same time. Behind the water curtain, the once flawless, extremely hard stone wall had completely retreated. Although it was slow, but it finally revealed a new cave entrance. Shah Danon startled at the opening of the secret cave. His heart was a little excited, a little afraid. But deep in his heart, like he did not want to admit, he was a little curious. This 800 years felt an important place. What is in it? Bailu slowly walked to the shore, stood next to him. Her eyes were full of smile. Shah Danon took a glance at her. Her skin was like snow, extremely beautiful. The water droplets slid down from the side of her face. It was like hitting his heart. His body shook. He did not dare to look anymore. He turned his head, said quietly, "Congratulations." Bailu startled, but the smile in her eyes did not diminish. Her voice was also a little gentle, said, "This is because you are careful." Shah Danon did not know why, but his mouth was a little dry, his face was a little hot. He took a step to the side, subconsciously stayed away from the girl, said, "Then why don't you go in and see?" Bailu looked at him, suddenly smiled. "You seem a little afraid of me?" Shah Danon immediately shook his head like a rattle drum, said, No. Bailu looked at him for a while, then nodded. There was still a smile on her face, said, "Then let us go in together." Shah Danon was surprised, hesitated for a moment, said, No, this is your falcon place. Or yourself, Bailu snorted, said, "If there is a way out, you are not going to go in?" Shah Danon startled, scratched his head, said, "That is true, then let us go." Bailu smiled, nodded, stepped into the water again, passed through the water curtain, entered the cave. Shah Danon hesitated for a moment, then finally followed. This was a deep tunnel. The glowing things on the wall were obviously less than the outside. Although they could still see the path, it was very dark. Shah Danon and Bailu walked very carefully. After all, this was the first time someone came here for 800 years. No one knew if the old monsters of Bloodforger left some powerful prohibition. The journey was peaceful, no accident happened. But the tunnel was twisted, deep and long, and it was slowly going up. Shah Danon roughly estimated that he and Bailu had already arrived at the center of the mountain. While he was thinking, Baiyao, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped, said in a low voice, "We are here." Shah Danon's heart jumped. He looked ahead and saw at the end of the tunnel, a bright light shined on them. It was a large stone chamber. They looked at each other. Then Bailu took the lead and walked toward the stone chamber. As they got closer, they could see the stone chamber clearly. The entire stone chamber was round shape. The tunnel was in the middle of the stone chamber. Opposite of it, there was another tunnel that extended further inside. It seemed like this was not the only end. On the left side of the stone room, there were 2 huge stone statues. One of them had a benevolent face and was standing there with a smile. His clothes were carved so vividly that it looked like the wind was blowing. He looked a bit like the Buddhist Guanyin Bodhisattva. The other one had a completely different appearance. Ferocious, black face, ghost horns, 8 hands and 4 heads. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of its mouth. It made people shudder. In front of the 2 statues, there was a stone table. On top of it was an incense burner. Next to it were several packs of incense. They were all covered with dust. Probably there was no incense for 800 years. At the other end of the stone chamber, there were only a few futons casually thrown on the ground. There was nothing else. Shah Danon was surprised. Bailu walked up and picked up a futon. She shook off the dust and placed it in front of the stone table. Then she picked up the incense on the table and lit it with her flint. She inserted it into the incense burner, then returned to the futon and kneeled down solemnly. In the stone chamber, light smoke rose. Bailu was kneeling on the ground. Shah Danan stood behind her, heard her voice echoing in the stone chamber. Nether Mother, Heaven Vidyaraja, 43rd generation disciple of the Holy Faction, Bailu sincerely greets you. The Holy Faction has suffered from disaster, weakened for a long time. Countless of believers for the revival of the Holy Faction, wave after wave. Only wish, Nether Mother, take pity on the common people. Give me blessings, revive the Holy Faction, purify all living beings, and enter the state of eternal bliss. Shah Danan thought for a moment, then understood. These two statues were probably the evil gods worshipped by the Falcon. He sneered, turned his head, and did not look at them anymore. Chapter 77. Bailu solemnly and devoutly kowtowed 3 times, then stood up and peeked at Shah Danan. He was looking somewhere else, stood there motionlessly. Bailu frowned, but did not say anything. She said lightly, "Let's go." When Shah Danan walked into the tunnel with her, he had a good impression of this lady. But now, seeing the two evil gods, he immediately remembered the difference between factions, remembered the teachings of his master. His face turned cold, nodded slightly, said, "Good." Bailu glanced at him, then walked deeper into the tunnel. Shah Danan followed behind her. This time they did not go far. They entered another spacious place. However, this place was not decorated like the stone room outside. Instead, it was a cave with strange stalactites hanging upside down. There were all kinds of strange stalactites in the cave, and the colors were also different. In front of the two of them, there was a huge monument at the entrance of the cave. On it, there were 10 big words carved in flamboyant calligraphy. The heaven and earth are heartless. Treat all living things as straw dogs. Each of the 10 large words were almost half the size of a person. The strokes were simple. The strokes were bold, like a dragon and snake. It had the momentum of whistling through the sky. Shah Danan did not feel anything at first, but after a moment, he felt dizzy. He took a step back uncontrollably. He was surprised, quickly calmed himself down. The words were still on the tablet, did not move a bit, but the spirit was really scary. Shah Danan was surprised. He saw Bailu had walked around the giant tablet and went deeper into the cave. He followed her. Going around the stone tablet, there were all kinds of stalactites behind it. The two of them walked for a while in the stone forest. Bailu, who was walking in front, suddenly stopped and exclaimed. Almost at the same time, Shah Danan suddenly found the fire stick that he used to fix his arm suddenly glowed with a strange light. Especially the bead at the front of the fire stick, it glowed with an unusual green light. But this time it was soft, like he had met an old friend, an old acquaintance, filled with endless longing and nostalgia. Shah Danan looked forward in surprise. Through Bailu's side, he saw the scene that surprised Bailu. The bottom of the cave was a smooth stone wall. There was a tunnel on both sides of the wall, leading to an unknown place. But under the stone wall, there was a green stone platform. There was a skeleton on it, sitting quietly in a sitting position. At this moment, the bead on the fire stick was facing the skeleton, emitting a gentle green light. Bailu stood in front. She did not notice Shah Danan's strange expression and the change of the fire stick in his hand. After the initial shock, she quickly calmed down. After all, she was a falcon. Why would she be afraid of a skeleton? She walked forward and took a closer look. She did not find anything strange. She turned to Shah Danan, smiled. Perhaps this is the black-hearted old devil who shocked the world 800 years ago. Shah Danan naturally did not have any good impression to the falcon. He snorted, said, "Let us quickly find a way out." Bailu peered at him, pursed her lips, said, "If you want to find it, go find it yourself." Shah Danan startled. He was a little embarrassed. He snorted, turned around, and walked into the tunnel on the left. He had not taken 2 steps when he secretly shook his head at himself, thinking how could he lose his composure in front of this evil faction girl? Once he was provoked, he had such a big reaction. He was afraid that right now in her eyes, she was probably laughing at him. But it was just thinking. Since he had taken a step, he could not turn back. After a few steps, there was no movement behind him. It seemed Bila did not follow him. Shah Danan did not know why, but his heart was a little disappointed. Then he scolded himself, good for nothing. He pulled himself together and carefully walked into the depth of the tunnel. The tunnel that Shah Danan was in now was no different than the road he came from, but it was much more quiet. Looking at the far end, it was almost dark. The road was also longer. He really could not understand how the Falcon Bloodforger could open such a large project. After walking like this for a while, Shah Danan suddenly noticed the light in front of him was getting brighter. He quickened his pace and walked forward. At the end of the road, there was a soft light, especially clear in the darkness, like a gentle tentacle, tempting the people of the world. Shah Danan took a deep breath, then stepped into the light. Bila watched Shah Danan's figure disappeared into the tunnel. She startled, then her face darkened. Her father was a powerful person in the Falcon. She was like a princess since she was young. No one dared to disobey her. But today, in this desperate situation, she met a young man from the righteous with a bad temper. She could not help but be angry. Speaking of which, Shah Danan was also a friendly young man at Mount Jadian. Why he was always in conflict with Bailu, other than the prejudice of his family, he probably could not explain it himself. Bailu, of course, did not know about this, but she saw Shah Danan had made things difficult for her several times. Her heart was very uncomfortable, but both of them were in a desperate situation. It was not good to teach this bread a lesson. She snorted and remembered it in her heart, but it was impossible for Bailu to force herself to follow Shah Danan. Without a second thought, she turned around and walked into the tunnel on her right. After a few steps, Bailu felt it was similar to the tunnel outside. But the glowing things on the walls were less. The tunnel was a bit dark. Fortunately, this path was not very long. Soon, Bai Yao reached the end and stepped into a stone room. It was a medium-sized stone chamber. There were many shelves on one side and a pile of trash on the other side. Most of the trash were iron weapons like knives, swords, spears, etc. Most of them were broken. What was more obvious was there was an axe at the top. It was rusted, quite large, and still intact. It looked like it was made of iron. Bailu lost interest after a few glances. She turned and walked to those shelves. After a closer look, her face showed joy at first, but not long after, it changed into disappointment. The shelves were filled with labels. Some of the words were already blurred, but there were still some words that were barely legible, but they were enough to make one's heart beat faster. They were all names such as Five Mountain Divine Halberd, Moon Watching Rope, Leaving Personal, and so on. Bila grew up in the Falcon. Her father was an erudite genius. Of course, she knew these were the top grade Esper in the Falcon. How could she not be happy? Unfortunately, most of the items on the shelves only had labels, but no substance. She was happy for nothing. She sighed, but she still hoped to be lucky. She looked at the shelves one by one, but all the shelves were empty. Perhaps heaven will not disappoint those who wait. She found a small iron box in the last shelf. But there was no label on the shelf, so she did not know what was inside. Bila was happy. She carefully picked up the box. She felt her hand was very heavy. She shook it a few times, but there was no sound. Bailu pondered for a while, then put the box on the ground. She took a deep breath and focused. She waved her right hand. The stone chamber glowed with white light. A jade-like flower suddenly appeared in the air. It gave out a light fragrance. Bila looked serious. She flipped her right hand. The small flower in the air shone brightly and flew to the top of the box. The white light covered the entire box. Then, Bailu carefully reached out her hand to open the box. She pressed on the lid of the box. Bailu felt that the box was not locked. She frowned. Her eyes were even more alert. She gritted her teeth and opened the lid. There was a light caw sound, and before he could see what was inside the iron box, a gust of black gas came out. Bailu's face changed. She almost fell back like she was electrocuted. The white flower on the top of the box immediately rushed down. The black gas was covered by the white light. It could not get out. After a while, the black gas gradually withered, and the white flower gradually turned black. It actually absorbed the black gas. After the black gas completely disappeared, Bailu waited for a while before walking over. She looked at her flower. Her father spent a lot of effort to make the treasure sad flower for her. The white, jade-like petals had completely turned purple and black. It looked a bit ferocious. Bilu's face slightly changed. She whispered, "Ancient corpse poison. Old Blackheart is really black-hearted. He actually made this kind of thing." She cursed the Devil Cole Senior Elder Blackheart in a low voice while looking at the iron box. Chapter 78. It was very simple. In a small iron box, there was only one thing, a golden, perfect little bell. Bilu startled. She did not expect the iron box had ancient corpse poison, such a rare poison, but it was only guarding a little bell. She looked left and right, did not find anything strange. She pondered for a moment, then slowly reached out her hand to pick up the little bell. Jingle. A clear jingle echoed in the secret stone room that had been quiet for 800 years. Bilu picked up the bell. The center of the bell was delicate. A thin iron chain was tied to the bell. When it shook, the center of the bell lightly hit the body of the bell and made the sound again. Jingle, jingle. Bilu saw it. She was a young girl and liked it very much. The disappointment she felt just now was diluted a lot. She examined it carefully again. There was nothing strange about it. It seemed to be an ordinary delicate bell. But Elder Blackheart kept it so secretively and carefully. This bell must have something unusual. When there is a chance, she will ask her father. Bilu calmed down. She looked at the little bell and liked it more and more. She tied it on her waist and turned her body. It really made a series of clear bell sound, very pleasant to the ear. Bilu was very proud, nodded. After that, she carefully examined the stone room again, but to no avail. She even checked the pile of garbage, but there was nothing worth paying attention to, let alone any way out. After that, Bilu slowly stood up. It was time to check the situation of that stupid boy. Before she left the stone room, she took a last look back. The stone room was still messy. After she turned over the pile of trash, it was even more messy. All kinds of weapons were scattered on ground. The axe was also carelessly thrown at the corner. After that, she walked out of the stone room. The tunnel on the left side that Shah Danon entered was much longer than the one on the right side that Bilu entered. Bilu walked for a while before she saw the light, but she still could not see the situation inside. But for some reason, there was no movement inside. She had a faint worry in her heart. There were a lot of strange and cruel things in Mordun. It was hard to predict, will it? She unconsciously quickened her pace and entered the stone room. After a careful look, she was relieved. Shah Danon was standing in the stone room, staring at the stone wall, lost in thought. Bilu breathed a sigh of relief. Then she carefully observed the stone room. This stone room was a lot bigger than the one she just entered. But it was empty, nothing. But on the hard stone wall of the stone room, there were densely carved words. What Shah Danon was looking at with his eyebrows tightly frowned were those words. Bilu frowned, walked forward and took a look. Joy appeared on her face. At the beginning of the stone carving, there were only two big words. Libro. Libro, this is Libro. Bilu couldn't help but cheered. Shah Danon's body shook. Then he realized Bilu had come to him. But his attention was only on what she said. Libro? Do you know what Libro is? Bilu glared at him, said, "How can I not know? This arcane book is the scripture of our holy sect. From the ancient times until now, all of the holy sect's disciples' magical powers are learned from this arcane book." Shah Danon's body shook again. His face was filled with confusion. He turned his head and stared at the stone carving on the wall. After a while, he said quietly, "No, impossible." Bilu's face darkened, said, "This is our holy faction's scripture, our top secret. Didn't you say we are evil? Why are you still peeping?" Shah Danon ignored her. His eyes were only on the words on the wall. Libro, Volume 1. The creation of the world is the time of chaos. Ignorance is not divided. The sun and moon contain its light. The world is mixed with its body. It has changed. Clear and turbid is Chun. The reason why the world can last long is because it is not born by itself, so it can last long. But all things in the world have their own form. Living beings are addicted to the form of self, the form of human, the form of living beings, the form of longevity. Thinking the form of all beings, the heart grows 3 poisons, 3 fears, 3 terrors, cannot last long. Nature has no punishment, Tao praises no name. That is why there is no self, no person, no living beings, no life that is the light. Hold the right path. The inner body has its own nature, the world is the heart. That is why the heart of the world moves in the earth. That is why there is no real and no void. That is why the world is natural, there is no action and no creation. That is why things do not exist. It is not enough to prepare. Note 1. Bailu snorted. She was about to get angry, but after second thought, she did not say anything. She also looked at the wall. After a few sentences, she felt dizzy. She admired Sha Danan for being able to read such dry words. But when she turned to look at Sha Danan, she was surprised. His face was filled with pain and confusion. His whole body was slightly trembling, an indescribable strange feeling. Actually, no one in this world could be as excited as Sha Danan right now. This so-called Falcon scripture, heavenly book, this so-called general principles, in Sha Danan's eyes, each word was like a knife, piercing into his heart. Compared to when he was young, when he found out Jadian's Taoist cultivation method and Posey's Fawn wisdom cultivation method were completely opposite, the impact it brought to him was hundreds of times greater. From this paragraph of words, he found, since he was young, he secretly thought Taoism and Buddhism were completely different cultivation method. But in this book, there was a trend of the same destination. Even so, even though he was surprised, he could still accept it. But as he continued to read, his face gradually turned pale. Because in this so-called Falcon scripture, heavenly book, he found a big secret. The Falcon's magical power was extreme and unique, but the root of it was in this heavenly book. Taoism focus on controlling nature. Buddhism focus on understanding one's own nature. But in heavenly book, it seemed to cover all of them. It not only had Taoism's thought, but also Buddhism's great magic. If it was another person like Bailu, she would not think anything after reading these words. She thought it was the great magic left by her grandmaster. But in the eyes of Sha Danan, the only person in this world who knew both Taoism and Buddhism's true magic, it was very scary. A thought that he had never had before haunted him. What was the right thing to do? He could not help but continue to read. His face was pale, his mind was excited, with fanaticism and strange curiosity. He could feel a big secret was right in front of him, but he could not touch it, could not see it. But it attracted him to that goal even more. However, in his heart, there was also a bit of fear. Was this what he should be doing? Bila looked at Sha Danan for a while. He was still concentrating on the stone carving on the wall. His expression was strange. It seemed like he completely forgot she was standing next to him. Anger rose in her heart. She snorted, but Sha Danan turned a deaf ear and did not make any movement. Bila curled her lips. She was very angry, but she did not want to teach this person a lesson. She turned around and walked out. Before she left, she even stomped hard on the ground. Unfortunately, that stupid boy did not react at all. Bailu angrily walked out of the stone chamber and returned to the stalactite cave. She was angry at the skeleton. She thought it was nothing, but that boy was not pleasing to her eyes. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. Then she saw the beautiful, heart-rending flower was now black. She immediately shifted her anger to Elder Blackheart. She pointed at the skeleton and said angrily, "You old bastard, you have been dead for 800 years and still want to harm people. You caused my jade flower to become. Unable to continue, Bai Yao's anger grew bigger and bigger. Without saying anything more, she waved her sleeve. Heartsick flower flew out and circled around the skeleton. After a moment, an ear-piercing, bone-cracking sound was heard. Ka-ka, that skeleton actually split into pieces and fell down. After she attacked, Bailu's anger became a little better. She could not help but regret it. She did not know why she got so angry. But when she turned around, she was surprised. On the stone wall that was covered by the skeleton, there were a few lines of words there. She quickly went to take a closer look. There were 4 lines of words on the wall. Bells cry, hundreds of flowers wither, the figure become thin like frost. Deep love is bitter, life is bitter, Infatuation is bitter for heartless. Note 1. This general outline text bibliography. Tao Te Ching, Diamond Sutra, Altar Sutra, Jin Shu, Jizhan Biography, Zhou, Yifu Guozhuan Commentary, etc. Chapter 79. Bila startled, then read it again carefully. The strokes of the 4 lines of words were more delicate, very different from the tomes of heavenly tomes in the stone chamber. It seemed like it was done by another person, and the meaning of the words was like the resentful words of an infatuated girl. But why would it appear in the Falcon's important place, Blooddrop Cave? It was really strange. She pondered for a long time, but still could not find any answer. She shook her head and was about to give up. But when she turned around, she saw Shah Danon had silently walked out from the stone chamber and stood behind her. His face was strange, like pain and surprise, also like confusion. His brows were frowned. His muscles were slightly twisted, almost ferocious. Bila was surprised, couldn't help but screamed, "Ah!" and took a step back. The delicate little bell gently vibrated on her waist, producing a clear and melodious jingle that echoed in the cave. When Shah Danon heard the sound of the bell, his body shook, like he was suddenly awakened. His face calmed down, but what replaced it was confusion. Just now, he was in the stone room pondering over the heavenly tomes' stone inscriptions. Suddenly, the fire stick beside his hand seemed to have woken up. Not only did it light up, that ice-cold feeling almost covered his entire body in an instant. Then, as if subconsciously, he walked out until he saw the pile of broken skeletons. Shah Danon looked at the fire stick tied to his left hand. It was still lit up with faint green light, facing the broken and fallen skeleton, like mourning for an old friend. Shah Danon did not know why he suddenly had this idea. But looking at the skeleton, deep in his heart, he also felt sad. Although he knew the person who died here must be an important person in Falcon Bloodforder, perhaps like Bila said, it was Elder Blackheart himself, but for some reason, he felt close to this skeleton. The light of the fire's stick dimmed, returned to ugly black, motionless. Shah Danon was still staring at the skeleton. Then under Bilu's gaze, he slowly walked up. Bilu snorted, stood in front of him, sneered and said, "Although I don't have a good impression of Blackheart, and we are for different factions, but we are both disciples of the Holy Sect. We have made a solemn oath in front of the Nether Mother and Heaven Demon Bright Throne. If you want to be rude to his Dharmakaya, I will not agree." Shah Danon looked at him, couldn't help, but said, "Now he is smashed into pieces. It is probably because of you." Bila blushed, but she did not give in. She said decisively, "Of course I will repent to the Holy Mother and Wisdom King, but I will not allow you to be rude." Shah Danon looked at him, suddenly said, "I don't mean that." Bilu startled. Seeing his calm face, without any hatred, she felt this Jadian young man was very different from those righteous people she met before. While she was hesitating, Shah Danon walked past her. She hesitated for a moment, then turned around and looked at him. Shah Danon walked to the pile of skeletons. The pale white bones were already glowing with faint green light. After Bilu's heavy hit, the bones below the chest were all gone. Only the skull was still intact. It was at the top of all the bones. The 2 empty eyes were looking at Shah Danon. Shah Danon shuddered. He faintly felt there was a soul in those eyes, staring at him. But in the end, he still walked up and slowly reached out his hand to gather the scattered bones into a pile. A cold feeling came from the bones, but there was no sense of fear or terror. Like they were old friends. In Shah Danon's heart, there was a feeling of relief. A feeling of relief after doing what he should do. Although it was strange, but he really had this feeling. He thought, "This fire stick is too strange. If I can survive this, I need to ask Master." When he was done, he was about to stand up. Just at this moment, from the corner of his eye, he caught a glimpse of the place where the skeleton was sitting. Because he had swept away the bones, some words were faintly revealed. He couldn't help but exclaim, "Huh." Bilu was standing at the side, watching Shah Danon coldly doing those strange things. Suddenly, she heard Shah Danon's shout of finding something. Her curiosity was aroused. She also walked over and looked at that place. There were also a few lines of words. Bitter heart, endured to look back, regret too late, difficult to get along with. Gold bell clear and bloodthirsty, whole life always. When it came to the fourth sentence, the strokes became weaker and weaker. Especially when it came to the third word, general, it was even more sloppy and almost indistinguishable. In the end, it was even skipped over and stopped there. It seemed that the person who wrote it had no strength to continue writing. In the cave, Shah Danon and Bailu were silent. They could faintly feel between the lines there was a sad story. The woman's heart was hurt, but the man was also filled with regret. Shah Danon was a little lost in thought. Although he had never seen this unknown couple, but for some reason, after thousands of years, he still felt sad when he saw this ruin. Bailu frowned. Her eyes stared at the lines of words. Her mouth murmured, "Gold bell clear and bloodthirsty. Gold bell clear and bloodthirsty." Gold bell? Ah, right, gold bell. She seemed to have thought of something and cried out in joy, her face beaming with joy. Shah Danon was surprised, asked, "What happened to Jinling?" Bailu was very excited. Her face was filled with joy, said, "It is Lady Gold Bell. You don't know?" Shah Danon blankly shook his head. Bailu snorted, glared at him, then happily said, "Lady Gold Bell is a powerful person of our holy faction 1,000 years ago. Rumor has it that she is extremely intelligent and has a profound cultivation. She has a great understanding of the holy cult's tones of arcane. She founded the He Huan sect alone in the holy cult. She is a first-class figure among the women in our cult." Shah Danon immediately lost his interest. From what she said, he knew Lady Goldbell was a powerful person of Falcon 1,000 years ago. But the faction she created was called He Huan. He knew this old woman was not a good person. Bila seemed to admire this Lady Goldbell a lot. Shah Danon snorted, did not answer her. He turned around and rearranged the pile of bones that he messed up while reading the words. A strange thought came into his mind. "Seems like you're also an infatuated person. Perhaps you also died for a woman." The dead person ignored him, but Shah Danon's imagination made him feel closer to the skeleton. Bailu was laughing on the side for a long time, talking to herself. Never thought that Lady Jingling actually has feelings for this damn Blackheart old devil. Humph, it must be that Blackheart old devil is heartless. Heartless. Deserves to be struck by lightning. Best if he is dead. Nonsense. Shah Danon suddenly shouted. Bila, startled, couldn't say anything. After a while, she reacted and stared at him for a long time, then asked curiously, "What did you say?" As soon as Shah Danon said it, he immediately knew something was wrong. He is a righteous person, but he inexplicably defended a Falcon villain from 800 years ago. If the Jadian Masters heard it, it will be a heavy punishment. But at that time, his heart was excited and blurted it out. Now Bailu asked him back. He was embarrassed and couldn't say anything. Bailu looked at him strangely, then suddenly remembered something. She immediately forgot Shah Danon. She grabbed the golden bell on her waist, excitedly laughed. "Ah, isn't this Lady Gold Bell's Lupin bell?" While speaking, she quickly turned the golden bell around and examined it carefully. Sure enough, there were 3 small words on the inside of the bell. Lupin bell. Shah Danon saw Bailu's joyful face almost passed out from laughing. It seemed like this was a very powerful esper. She accidentally got it. His heart felt uncomfortable. He said coldly, "Did you find a way out?" Bailu's eyes were filled with the little bell in front of her. She answered casually, "No." Shah Danon turned his head, said lightly, "Then you can die in this cave while holding this golden bell." Bila startled, then realized it was so. The most important thing now is to find a way out. She quickly asked, "Did you find it?" Chapter 80. Shah Danon silently shook his head. They looked at each other. Bailu took back her smile, said seriously, "Then let us find a way first." At the moment of life and death, Shah Danon silently nodded. The two of them searched together in the tunnel, carefully checked every wall, every crack. Shah Danon even ignored Bailu's strong objection. Even checked the statues of Nether Mother and Heaven Vidyaraja, but still found nothing. When they met again in front of the pile of broken bones, seeing each other's depressed expression, their faces darkened. Bailu said bitterly, "Are we going to die here?" Shah Danon lowered his head. His expression could not be seen clearly. Bailu also became silent. Suddenly, the shadow of death shrouded their young lives. After a long time, in the silence, when they were speechless, Shah Danon suddenly jumped up, turned, and walked away. Bailu was surprised, said, "What are you doing?" Shah Danon gritted his teeth, said, "I will search again. There must be a way out. We will not die here." But in his heart, there was still a sentence that he did not say out, echoing for a long time. "I will definitely see Ling-Er Shiji again. Even if I die, I will bury her in Bamboo Peak." Bailu did not move, only sat on the platform, watching Shah Danon's stern face. At this moment of life and death, a strong desire to live suddenly burst out, kept searching. Once, twice, thrice, 4 times. Bailu could not remember how many times Shah Danon had come in and out of the stone chamber. Each time he returned without finding anything, but he was not discouraged. She did not know why his temper was so stubborn or his desire to live was so strong. He kept searching for the way out, always, always, until his steps began to shake, until he had no more strength, until he walked past Bailu. His body shook, then fell heavily on the ground and fainted. Bailu stared at him blankly, hesitated for a moment, then walked to him, turned his body over. After checking, she knew he was fine. He was just tired, plus hunger and thirst, so he fainted. Then she was relieved, but she suddenly froze. Facing herself, she asked in the depths of her heart, "Why should I be relieved? Why should I be relieved that he's fine?" This thought flashed through her mind like a spark. She looked deeply at him. The young face of this young man was haggard because of injury and thirst. Even his lips were cracked. Bailu gently put him down, stared at him for a while, then said softly, "Since we are destined to die here, I do not want to be left alone. At least there is someone to accompany me. That is good." She walked out, took some water from the small pond at the entrance of the cave. Then she took some dry food, mixed it with water, and wanted to feed Shah Danon. But because Shah Danon was unconscious, he could not eat any dry food. He just drowsily drank some water from Bailu's water skin, but he was not awake. After working for half a day, Bailu was also tired. After seeing Shah Danon's condition was stabilized, she slowly closed her eyes and fell into a deep sleep. After sleeping for a long time, Bailu woke up. Her first reaction was to look at where Shah Danon was. Shah Danon was still lying there, not moving, sleeping soundly. She was relieved, but she couldn't help but cursed. "Why are you sleeping like a dead pig?" As she spoke, she also smiled, as if looking at this young man, her mood also became better. Even the impending death in front of her had temporarily faded away. But she suddenly noticed that although Shah Danon was still sleeping, his face was flushed. Something was not right. She quickly reached out her hand to check. When she touched it, it was hot. She was surprised. Shah Danon did not get sick early or late. He had a high fever at this critical moment. Normally speaking, cultivator's body is naturally strong. Usually they will not get sick. But Shah Danon was heavily wounded for the past few days. Not only he was mentally and physically exhausted, his body was also heavily damaged. In the end, he risked his life to find a way out in this blood-drop cave. After he fainted, he had a high fever. His illness was not light. Even after a long time, the fever did not go down. In the cave, Bailu did not know how many days had passed. Bailu could not do anything. She could only get more cold water to cool him down, but it did not work. Then, Shah Danon's fever did not subside. He began to talk nonsense. Bailu was worried. She thought she would be waiting for death alone in this empty cave. She was terrified. Even Shah Danon's nonsense, even a breath, compared to the horrible days in the future, it was like heavenly music. But no matter how hard Bailu tried, she could only get more water. In this cave, there was no doctor and no medicine. How could she help? Shah Danon's illness was getting worse day by day. The frequency of him talking nonsense was getting more and more frequent. This day, Bailu was anxiously guarding the unconscious Shah Danon. Suddenly he turned over, his whole body shrunk. She screamed in confusion, "Ghost, ghost, ghost." Then she gritted her teeth. "You killed my parents, killed the entire village. I will kill you." Bailu was startled. She quickly hugged him and said, "No, no, there's no ghost here." Not sure if it was because of her words, Shah Danan calmed down. The fear on his face calmed down, but what followed was a heartbroken expression. His eyes were closed, his mouth whispered, "Shiji, Shiji, don't ignore me, I want. Don't ignore me." Bailu startled. Her heart suddenly felt sour, but she did not know where the courage came from. She said softly, "No, your Shiji is here. She will not ignore you." Shah Danan's face immediately showed a smile. Like this was his most blessed moment. His mouth kept saying, "Shiji, Shiji." Bailu looked at his face with a trace of faint happiness in the pain. There was a trace of pain in her heart. The girl that he missed so much, the Shiji that he could not forget even after he fainted. What kind of person is she? She suddenly remembered that day in Forsaken Abyss, the Jadian female disciple that Shah Danan tried his best to protect with blue sword. Could it be her? Bailu frowned. She remembered very clearly that girl was born with a beautiful face. It was not exaggerating to say it could cause the downfall of the city. No wonder Shah Danan would fall head over heels for her. But no matter how smart Bailu was, she would not know that the girl that Shah Danan could not forget was Hede, who was still in Mount Jadian's bamboo peak. In the following days, Bailu, who had been guarding Shah Danan, heard more about him from Shah Danan's nonsense. She knew he was born in a place called Grass Temple Village, knew the horrible massacre of the village, also knew the girl that he missed was his Shiji in Bamboo Peak. But she was still not sure if this Shiji was the girl with blue sword. But after taking care of Shah Danan these days, Bailu also felt she had a strange feeling for this young man. Staring at his haggard face every day, it was almost the only way for her to kill the boredom. She often stared at him like this for a long time. But she never thought, in the stone room on the other side, there was the Falcon's classic script, Omni. Sometimes, after Shah Danan fell asleep, she would slowly walk to the words left by Lady Jingling, stared at it for a moment, then said softly, "Madam, according to the ancient legend, you have left a reprimand. All men in the world are heartless. But have you ever seen this man called Shah Danan? He is very infatuated." No one in the empty cave answered her question. However, when she turned around, the small golden bell let out a clear and melodious ring. It gently echoed around her and in the cave, as if it was telling her something. Like in the unseen world, that pair of gentle eyes, that lingering ghost, was staring at them, entangled them. Chapter 81. After that bout of strong nonsense, not knowing if it was because Shah Danan's body was strong or Bailu's comfort was effective, the high fever that had been persisting slowly subsided. Shah Danan also slowly regained his consciousness and became sober. But his condition was still not light. Most of the time he was still resting on the bed. This day, Bailu had nothing to do, so she wandered around the cave. Finally, she came to the 4 sentences left by Lady Jingling. She read it carefully, then sighed. Shah Danan sat beside her, couldn't help but ask, "Why are you sighing?" Bailu snorted, said, "I am sighing for Lady. She is so talented and beautiful, but she was betrayed by you stinky men. Her life of pain, it is not worth it." Shah Danan was speechless. Bailu read the sentences carefully again. Suddenly she exclaimed, "Huh." She found something strange. The last word of the last sentence was pain. The word mouth was sunk deeply, very different from the other words. She rolled her eyes and immediately realized it. She picked up the Hawan bell on her waist and compared it. The size was just right. She couldn't help but cheer. Shah Danan was surprised. "What is it?" Bailu turned back and smiled at him. "You are saved." Shah Danan was surprised, then immediately became spirited, said joyfully, "Really?" Bailu inserted the bell. Nothing happened, so she tried to turn it left and right. After a while, suddenly there was a caw-caw sound in the cave. The stone wall was shaking. Bailu was shocked. She took the bell and quickly stepped back. A bang sound was heard. The smooth stone wall collapsed, revealing the inner layer. There were also words carved on it like a heavenly book in the inner room. Shah Danan was happy at first, but then he looked around the stone wall. His face turned ugly. It seemed like this trap was set up by Lady Jingling to hide the words on the stone wall. There was no way out. He was very depressed. Bila focused on the words on the stone wall. The thing left by Lady Jingling was hidden so well, it must not be a normal thing. After a long time, her face was uncertain, but she sighed heavily, said quietly, "So this is the infatuation curse." Shah Danan was impatient. He came and took a few glances. The first few words were, "The evil spirits of the 9 underworlds, the gods and devils of the heavens. With my blood and body, I offer it as a sacrifice. 3 lifetimes and 7 lifetimes forever in hell. For love, I will not regret it even if I die." He knew it was the evil spell of the evil path, but Bai Yao's expression was more happy. He couldn't help but snorted, said, "Is there a way out?" Bai Yao was stunned, said no. Shah Danan said lightly, "Then what is the use of learning it?" Bai Lu was silent. After a while, she said, "You don't know the origin of this infatuation incantation. This incantation has been passed down in our holy sect since ancient times. But according to legend, no one was willing to use it." Shah Danan was curious, asked, "What is it?" Bai Lu sighed, said, "According to legend, this incantation was learned by a wise female ancestor from Libra, but it can only be practiced by females. I heard this incantation is made from the blood of females. Turn it into a curse, powerful." Before she finished, Shah Danan already interrupted her. His eyes were filled with disdain, said, "Then call it blood curse. Don't call it infatuation incantation, evil path, flaunting elegance." Bai Lu's face changed, then startled, said quietly, "You are right. Even Lady Jingling, she elder, is not useless in the end." Shah Danan ignored her. They stayed for a few days. Shah Danan would read Libra when he was free, but Bai Lu often stared at the incantation she called Incantation of Infatuation on the stone wall. In the first volume of Libra, there was no actual cultivation method. It was just a general outline. But Shah Danan had learned both Buddhism and Taoism. He could understand the incantation, but he could only understand it. Shah Danan still could not understand the state of combining Buddhism and Taoism mentioned in Tian Shu. Could it mean pure essence and fawn wisdom, 2 great incantations, must be combined and cast at the same time? Even though the hope of survival was not high, but there was still some temptation in his heart. Shah Danan quickly tried to cultivate according to the direction of Libra, but it was not easy to use 2 great incantations at the same time. After a moment, his blood was already boiling. He had to stop. For the next few days, there was no progress at all. But then, there was a bigger problem in front of them. There was no food. Cultivators of cultivation, although they can go to the sky and enter the sea, but they are still mortal. The legendary senior cultivators who practiced in Nidia did not drink and eat, but no one has ever seen it. After entering the cave, Shah Danan's food was lost. Although there was water to drink in the cave, but only Bai Lu brought the food. How could it be enough? Even though they tried to save it, they quickly finished it. They stayed in the cave for a long time. Perhaps it was only 2 days. Shah Danan and Bai Lu were staring at the empty food bag. Sigh. Bai Lu sat on the platform, next to the pile of bones, but she did not feel uncomfortable. It seemed like the Falcon women were really different from normal people. But now, she had a worried look on her face. Shah Danan's condition was getting better quickly. The fever was almost gone. Except his body was still weak, everything else was fine. He heard Bai Lu's sigh. He turned and looked at the Falcon woman. In his eyes, the woman in green dress was sitting on the edge of the platform. Her feet were in midair, swinging. The Hahuan bell on her waist was ringing. If not because of this environment and knowing her identity, Shah Danan would think she was still an innocent girl. But looking at her like this, Bai Yao was much more haggard than when they first met. She was a girl, so she still went to the small water curtain every day to wash up, so she still looked beautiful and did not feel dirty. However, these days she had clearly lost weight. Thinking of this, Shah Danan's heart was moved. Since he was young, he heard his master and Shi Xiang's taught him that Falcon were all selfish and cruel. But now in this dangerous cave, why would this evil cult girl share half of the food with him? Shah Danan was lost in his thoughts. He did not notice Bai Lu was looking at him. Seeing Shaw Danon was staring at her, her face suddenly blushed, said, "What are you looking at?" Shaw Danon was surprised, quickly turned his head, said embarrassedly, "No, nothing." Bailu was behind him, but she did not scold him as he imagined. After a long while, a sigh came, said, "We are trapped in this cave, not far from death. You don't need to be so restrained." Shaw Danon, startled, slowly turned around, looked at Bailu. On her skinny but still beautiful face, there was a faint, helpless smile. He blurted out, "Actually, when I'm sick, you don't need to give me most of the food. That way you can live for a few more days, perhaps. What?" Bailu suddenly interrupted him. Shaw Danon, startled, shook his head, said quietly, "Perhaps you can be saved." Bailu slightly shook her head, showed a little smile on her face, said, "I don't want to die, but I don't want to stay in this silent cave, waiting for a skeleton and a rotting corpse. If I do that, before anyone comes to save me, I'm afraid I will go crazy first." Shaw Danon heard what she described. He couldn't help but shudder. This is really not a life for a human. Bailu looked at him, said lightly, "What? You are also afraid?" Shaw Danon immediately straightened his back, said loudly, "No way." Bai Yao's lips curled up into a smile. She looked at him with a hint of tenderness in her eyes. She said softly, "Promise me one thing, okay?" Shaw Danon frowned, said, "What?" Bailu smiled faintly. "We have finished all the food besides some clean water. There is nothing else to eat. I'm afraid in less than 7 days, we will starve to death." Shaw Danon was silent. Bailu's face was calm, but what she said next shocked Shaw Danon like he saw a ghost. "In a few days, if you think I can't make it, then kill me first." Shaw Danon opened his mouth wide, pointed at her, and couldn't say anything. But unexpectedly, Bailu still calmly said the unbelievable and shocking words, "After I die, my body is still here. If you want to live, even if you eat my flesh, you can probably live for a while longer." Chapter 82. Shaw Danon almost fell to the ground. After half a day, he recovered from the huge shock and immediately said to himself, "The people of the evil cult are really all evildoers. They can even do this kind of thing." But seeing Bailu's calm face, his heart was chilled. He couldn't help but step back. The finger pointing at her was shaking, said, "What? What did you say?" Bailu looked at him. The gentleness in her eyes became stronger. But in Shaw Danon's eyes, it was more poisonous than all the poisons in the world combined. "Didn't you want to go back to Qing Yun Hill Bamboo Peak to see your Ling, Air Shiji? You still have a few of your sect members in this cave of fangs. They will definitely come to find you. The longer you live, the higher the chance they have of finding you." Bai Yao slightly lowered her head, but her tone was still so calm. But Shaw Danon did not care about her tone. He did not even notice how she knew about Ling Er Shiji. He pointed at her, said angrily, "Yo, you dare to ask me to eat? Eat. You evil heretics, unreasonable, shameless, disgusting, you. He got angrier, but his tongue was not very good. "I. After a long time, nothing came out. But his reaction was already expected by Bailu. She was not angry, did not mock, only stared at him for a while. Until Shaw Danon's heavy breath calmed down, she slowly said, "Eat me or not, that is up to you. But you must kill me first." "Here you go again." Shaw Danon said angrily, "Don't think I will work with you, Falcon. You give me some food, I will use my body to pay you back. If you want to drag me down with you, no way." Bailu slowly shook her head, said, "No, I am afraid." Shaw Danon habitually said, "Nonsense, I will never fall into your trap." "And what did you say?" At this moment of life and death, Bailu's mood had an unprecedented change. She seemed to fall into some kind of memory. A fear that Shaw Danon had never seen before appeared on her face. Then, she shook her head heavily, like she was trying to get rid of some thought. "Do you know how it feels to wait for death alone?" she said in a low voice. Shaw Danon, startled, faintly felt she had something else. He asked curiously, "What is it?" The corner of Bailu's eyes seemed to twitch. At this moment of death, facing this young man who was the only one who accompanied her, she could not control her emotions. Even her voice was a little hazy and hollow. "When I was 6, my mother took me back to the Six Fox Cave of Majestic Fox Mountain to visit my grandma. But at that time, You good faction attacked. The evil monks of Tian Temple used the golden pagoda bowl to collapse the entire Six Fox Cave. They buried me, my mother and grandma alive. Shah Danan's body suddenly shivered. A bad premonition, even a chill rose from his heart, from the top of his head to the bottom of his feet. Bailu seemed to be completely immersed in the painful memories. Her eyes looked straight ahead, empty, just like her tone, flat and hollow, with the deepest pain. At that time, I was so scared that I cried. I was so scared. It was a small cave. Because there were a few large rocks supporting us, we could survive. But Grandma was too heavily injured and passed away soon. Mother took me and cried bitterly in that pitch-black darkness, then buried Grandma. We were buried deep under the ground. Other than a few drops of water between the rocks, there was only hard and cold rocks around us. I was very scared, but Mother kept telling me, "Xiao Yao, don't be afraid. Dad will definitely come and save us." Shah Danan held his breath and listened carefully. There was an indescribable strangeness and faint fear, like something was about to happen. However, it was always pitch black in here. Father never came. I was very scared in that pitch-black cave. I was hungry, so I kept crying. I still remember, Mother sighed next to me, held me tightly in her arms, kept telling me, "Xiao Yao, don't be afraid, Xiao Yao, don't be afraid. Mother will not let anything happen to you. Your dad will definitely come and save us." Bailu's face turned pale, but she still continued. But Dad still did not come. I was so hungry. I kept crying to Mother for something to eat. Mother had searched the cave again and again, but she had never found anything. Then I was so hungry that I did not even have strength to cry. I could only moan in Mother's arms. Then, one day, Mother found a piece of meat. Shah Danan saw Bailu's body began to tremble at the same time when she spoke. I was so hungry, I did not care about anything. I ate it, and then fell into a comfortable sleep. At that time, Mother also laughed in the darkness. Just like that, Mother would find me a piece of meat every once in a while. I lived like that, but Mother's voice became weaker. Finally one day, I called her, but she did not answer. After that, I stayed in the darkness, waiting for death alone. Bila slowly turned her head, looked at Shah Danan. Shah Danan was stared at by her eyes. His heart was chilled. Do you know the feeling of waiting for death alone? Do you know the smell of Mother's body rotting next to you? Do you know the feeling of a person who can never see clearly, forever living in fear? Every time she asked, Shah Danan's body would tremble. Bila was silent. Shah Danan did not even dare to breathe. Finally, she was like waking up from a dream, but also like she was about to wake up. She continued. Finally one day, suddenly, a beam of light came from above. I screamed in fear, hid in the deepest corner. Then, the light became brighter and brighter. The hole above became bigger and bigger. I heard Father calling my and Mother's name. Then I saw Father jump down and blocked in front of me. He did not look at me first, but saw my mother first. When the light came, I only looked up and forgot to look at Mother. By the time I thought about it, it was already blocked by Father. I couldn't see Mother's corpse, but I clearly saw Father's body shake, as if his entire body had turned into stone. Then Uncle Azure Dragon, Uncle White Tiger, and Uncle Black Tortoise who jumped down with Father. All of them were stunned on the spot, motionless. I was suddenly very afraid, even more afraid than dying in the darkness. I whispered, "Father." Father slowly turned around. The three uncles lined up behind him, blocking my mother's body. I still couldn't see my mother. I whispered, "Father, where is Mother?" Shah Danan could see clearly. Every word Bailu said, her body would shake, as if the girl who asked was right in front of them. Father did not say anything, but his face was so scary. Although I am young, but I know, he really wanted to kill me, wanted to kill his daughter. But he did not do it. He saved me, held me in his arms, and left the dark cave. Just before I left, I peeked over Father's shoulder and saw that Mother's body had already been buried by the three uncles. Only one of her hands could be seen, but I don't know why. That hand. Bailu's voice suddenly became silent. Shah Danan was surprised. He looked at her. Bailu's face was pale. Her eyes were closed. Her body fell straight down, seemed to have fainted. Shah Danon subconsciously rushed to her and held her. He could feel the coldness in his hand, almost like a living person. He had just recovered from his illness. His body was weak. He spent a lot of effort to put Bailu on the platform. Looking at her pale face, Shah Danon suddenly realized his entire body was soaked in cold sweat. That night, not sure if it was night or not, but Shah Danon instinctively thought it was night. Bailu was unconscious. But in her dream, she kept calling mother and father. Their positions suddenly changed. It was Shah Danon who took care of her. But it seemed like it was a painful past in Bailu's heart. When she was unconscious, she screamed several times. Cold sweat poured down. Shah Danon was at a loss. Until the end, Bailu unintentionally waved her arms and grabbed his shoulder. After she snuggled into his arms, it was like she got someone to rely on. She gradually calmed down and fell asleep. But that pair of hands were tightly clutching Shah Danon's clothes. Even her nails had sunk into his flesh. Shah Danon grimaced in pain. But for some reason, looking at Bailu's pale face, he could not bear to leave. He forced himself to endure, let her snuggle in his arms, and sleep peacefully. Chapter 83. Bailu's past, to her, was like a deep pain. She had buried it in her heart for years, but at this moment of life and death, she recalled it again. Her mind was agitated, plus the lack of food these days. Her body was a bit weak, so she was unconscious for a long time. Shah Danon looked at the Falcon girl who was still holding him tightly in her sleep. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. Not long ago, he was a patient who came back from death's door. But at this moment, it was Bailu's turn to get sick. The two of them actually fell down one after the other. It would be hard for them not to die even if they wanted to. After a while, Shah Danon himself was sleepy, but he forced himself to sit up straight, because Bailu was lying in his arms. Looking at her haggard and slightly painful face, Shah Danon could not bear to leave. But it was not an easy thing to sit like this. He sat on the platform, 1 foot in the air, 1 foot on the ground, half slanted, body straight, without any place to lean after a long time, not to mention the soreness in his body, especially the place where Bailu was grabbing him tightly. Her fingers exerted force. Even after she fainted, the strength did not decrease. It really hurt to the bone. But Shah Danon's character was still able to bear it. He gritted his teeth and endured it. If it were other people, they would have already jumped up. But even so, the suffering was not light. Shah Danon complained in his heart. But in the end, he did not leave. After a long time, the drowsiness came. Under the numbing pain and soreness, he began to doze. Shah Danon stretched and woke up. He felt pain all over his body. As he was sighing, he suddenly found he was lying on the platform. Bailu, who was next to him, was gone. Shah Danon was surprised. He stood up and looked around. There was still no sign of Bailu. The entire cave was empty. There was no sound at all. Shah Danon suddenly felt a chill in his heart. It was like a person suddenly fell into a tomb. He frowned, stood up, and without thinking, started to look for Bai Yao. He searched the tome's stone room, then went to the treasure room, but did not see Bailu. Shah Danon thought for a moment, then walked outside. Not long after, he saw Bailu in the stone room that worshipped the 2 Falcon evil gods. In front of the benevolent Nether Mother and the ferocious Heaven Vidyaraja, Bailu knelt on the ground, her shoulders shaking. Although she tried to suppress it, she still made a low choking sound. She was actually crying. Shah Danon was stunned. No matter how he imagined, he could not imagine the Falcon girl who was always strong and competitive would secretly cry in front of the statue. He stood rooted to the ground, momentarily at a loss of what to do. But in the end, he slowly walked over and said hesitantly, why are you? Don't cry. Unexpectedly, it was better if he did not speak. Once she heard his words, the sorrow that Bailu had been holding back suddenly burst out. Her voice immediately became much higher. Crying loudly, she slowly raised her head. Her jade-like face also hung pearl-like tears. Shah Danon was stunned. He himself was only a young man. How could he understand the girl's mind? He immediately became flustered, like Bailu was crying because of him. He even stuttered when he spoke. You don't like this? I know, Bailu's eyes were filled with tears. Seeing Shah Danan's flustered appearance, she shook her head and gritted her teeth. But the sadness was unbearable. The tears that she had held in for more than 10 years now poured out. "It's me. I caused Mother's death." The girl, who was deeply immersed in the painful past, with a bit of sadness, said sorrowfully. Shah Danan immediately shook his head. Looking at her weak and helpless figure, his heart was absent-minded. It was like seeing the same helpless figure of him many years ago. "No." He walked up, said softly, "Your mother is the person who loved you the most. You were still young at that time. You don't know anything. How could you harm people?" Violet choked. But Dad always hated me. I know he wanted me dead. He blamed me for causing Mother's death." Shah Danan said quietly, "No, don't think too much. Your dad did not blame you. Didn't he come to save you? These years, did he ever mistreat you?" Bailu's body trembled. Her face also paled. Shah Danan looked at her from here. Her beautiful face was like a pear blossom in tears. The feeling of sadness was also soul-touching. But when she raised her head, behind the tears, she looked at Shah Danan. Shah Danan did not dare to look at her. He turned his eyes away. After a long time, "You are very good," she suddenly said quietly. Shah Danan's heart suddenly jumped. Then he forced himself to calm down, smiled. "No, it is just that we're going to die together. It is nothing to comfort you before we die." Bailu slowly stopped crying, wiped away the tears in her eyes, sighed, and said, "Yes, we are going to die together." Then she suddenly remembered something, said to Shah Danan, "You and I are going to die here. Do you ever regret it?" Shah Danan startled. Countless of images flashed through his mind. It was like at this moment he returned to Mount Jade Bamboo Peak. "Of course I regret it," he said in a low voice. Bailu's face darkened, said, "Humph, in the holy faction, there are many people who want to die with me. But you overestimate yourself." Shah Danan's anger rose, but when he looked at Bailu, his anger disappeared. He sighed, shook his head, "Perhaps. But if I can be buried in Bamboo Peak, then I can die without regret." Bailu's face darkened, stared at him. After a long time, she suddenly said, "You are doing this for your Ling-heir Shiji, right?" Shah Danan jumped up, pointed at her, surprised. How do you know?" Bailu turned her head, said, "It was something you said when you were talking nonsense when you were sick." Shah Danan was startled. He was about to say something to blame her, but then he thought, he and she are going to die here. Not only he will not be able to see his Shiji, after death, he will become a nether spirit. He will not be able to see the scenery of Bamboo Peak. I just don't know if senior sister will remember me. When he thought of this, his heart was suddenly disheartened. He sighed, unable to free himself from the deep sorrow. He turned and walked out. Looking at his back, Bailu was in a daze. After a long time, she slowly turned her head, looked at the two statues, and kowtowed. "Holy Mother, may you take pity on the people of the world, protect them, and protect them. Wisdom King, please use the power to open the sky and save." Her voice was suddenly cut off. Her entire body lay on the ground, motionless. At that moment, it was as if the surroundings had quietened down. But in her mind, it was like a turbulent sea, and a trace of light was flashing in these waves, but it was faintly discernible. She tried her best to catch it, to remember it. She slowly raised her head, carefully looked at the statue of Heaven Vidyaraja on her right side. Again and again, a thought in her mind shouted, "Not right, not right, there's something missing on the statue." She looked at it over and over again, not daring to breathe loudly. Finally, her gaze fell on the statue's empty right hand. She jumped up, couldn't hold back her joy, shouted, "Heaven Axe, that's right, where is Heaven Axe?" According to the Falcon legend, Nether Mother was the god that nurtured thousands of living beings, and Heaven Vidyaraja was the god that opened the heaven and earth, the god of punishment. This is very different from the ancient legend of the giant god Pangu. According to the legend, Heaven Vidyaraja was holding a heaven axe, so when the statue was made, it must have the shape of the axe. However, the right hand of this statue was empty. Bailu knew in the Falcon, Heaven Vidyaraja was one of the two great gods. No one would purposely disrespect him. And the Bloodforger Hall that built this Blooddrop Cave was also a Falcon faction, There must be a reason. Shah Danan returned to the cave, sat on the platform, silent. When he was thinking about his old friend in Bamboo Peak, Bailu rushed in with a joyful face. Seeing him sitting there, she shouted, "If you want to live, come here quickly." "What?" Shah Danan was surprised. He saw Bailu rushed into the treasure room on the right side like wind. He hesitated for a moment, but he could not resist the desire to live, so he followed her. Just when he stepped into the stone room, he heard Bila cheered. Bila picked up a huge iron axe from a pile of trash. It looked like she was using a lot of effort. It should be very heavy. Shah Danan ran to her and helped her hold the axe. It was really heavy. Even with both of them working together, they still could not hold it. He asked, surprised, "What are you doing?" Bila did not say much to him, said directly, "If you want to live, help me move this iron axe to the statue." Shah Danan gasped, surprised. What are you going to do?" Bila was too lazy to say more. She dragged the axe and walked away. But after a few steps, her body became weak and began to pant. Shah Danan shook his head and sighed, but he still walked to her. With their combined strength, they spent a lot of effort and finally brought the axe to the stone room where the statue was. Then Shah Danan rolled his eyes. He was very unwilling to hear Bailu said that they still need to put this heavy thing into the hand of the evil god. Shah Danan was already very suspicious. Now he heard they need to do things for the Falcon evil god. He immediately lost his anger. But he still could not dissuade Bailu. Seeing her sweating face and working hard, his heart softened. He thought it would be good to fulfill one of her wishes before he died. So he stepped forward and did his best to help her. The axe looked very large. Now that they were actually carrying it, the weight was even more unbelievable. Plus, they did not have any food for a long time. They miraculously completed this seemingly impossible task. After putting the axe on Heaven Vidyaraj's right hand, Shah Danan sat on the ground, panting, said, "You, Huff, you if you cannot find the way out, Huff. Originally we could live for 3 days. Now there's only 3 hours left." Bai Yao was also panting heavily, but the excitement in her eyes could not be concealed. After a short rest, she walked to the statue, carefully observed for a while, only to see that after the Ming Wang statue added a huge axe, it was really awe-inspiring. The imposing manner was pressing. She respectfully saluted to the Heaven Vidyaraja statue, said, "Vidyaraja Lord, please forgive disciple for being rude." Finished, she grabbed the axe, tried to shake it up and down, but there was no movement. She was the one who put the axe in. If there was any movement, it should have happened just now. Shah Danan sat on the ground. Watching her strange movement, he shook his head. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.